Oh, you are. Well, yeah, we kind of do something with it's just the same lines.
Okay, it's 9:01 and we can actually get started here. And let's call the budget committee to order. And thank you all for being here again. Right? Well, I don't know about bright, but early.
Yes.
There we go. And so I guess we'll step right in, you guys, and with the budget presentation.
Excellent, we will get started. Okay. So we're going to launch now into, we will have some department presentations, but we're gonna go ahead and get some of the special revenue funds out of the way first. These are some smaller funds, they're pretty straightforward, and let us know if you have questions as we go. So the clerk special revenue fund, we mentioned it yesterday during the clerk's presentation. There are some state statutes regarding how certain fees of hers have to be handled. And so those statute fees end up in this special revenue fund. We have fees for notary, recording, and archive. And this fund holds those. You can see just the fee revenue that comes in. There could be transfer revenue that goes out. I'm not really sure when we got transfer revenue coming in. Actually, now that I mention that. It's supposed to be fee-based. The notary fund and the recording fund and archive fund, those funds stay distinct. We have, within the fund, we have like pockets to keep them separate. For archive, there are 2 staff members who do archiving work. It's about 0.18 FTE. So the archive dollars take care of their time archiving, as well as I mentioned yesterday, we have some archive software. We have recording software that also will be covered in this. But also, we appropriate all the funds, because if a piece of election equipment were to go down, if she needed to purchase one immediately or something, you know, we want to make sure she has full appropriation to do whatever she needs to do. So this is a combination of planned expenses and appropriated dollars. You can see from the actuals for fiscal 22, fiscal 23, that the spending has been fairly minimal in the past, even though for budget for 24, we have the full amount available for use. Any questions on this one?
Why in 2025 are we down?
Okay, for the amount budgeted.
Yeah.
So for fiscal year 24, we had seen that, you can see what we budgeted. The recording in particular has grown quite large. That was 115,000 available for her in the current year. And so she had identified that software qualified for recording, like it meets the statute requirements. We can use that software. We can use these dollars to pay for that software. And so we went ahead and did that. So it's approximately $14,000 for that software. So it's reducing the current year amount that's held there by the 14,000. And then next year, we anticipate 101,000 still being available, again, to pay for this $14,000 software. Does that, it looks a little funny, but we do appropriate all of it, even though we don't have plans to spend most of it.
So, is there a difference between doing it that way and just putting more realistic numbers in there as expected and putting the rest in contingency?
The reason we do it that way is just so that it's available. It would.
So a contingency isn't available without.
Without, correct. And there are limitations on how much money you can move out of contingency without a public hearing. So this just keeps it nimble. These funds are so restricted by statute that there's very few uses, but when we do have a use, it's usually an emergency.
Okay.
And so to have to wait to publish a notice in the paper to move, you know, $80,000 to make it available for her notary, I mean, she's not gonna just spend it on anything. It's already locked down. So that would be kind of the purpose for just making it available.
Great, thank you for that.
Great question. Any other questions on this one in particular? Okay, the Community College Education Center Fund. This was established by an MOU with the Central Oregon Community College because we are joint owners in the building. And it is primarily a reserve fund that is used for equipment, building maintenance, and furnishings. For the last several years, both Central Oregon Community College and the county have contributed equal amounts into the fund. So you can see fiscal 23-24, and then what we budgeted for 25. Ours is a transfer in, theirs is intergovernmental revenue in. And so we just have them contained in this fund. The agreement of the group was to try to grow the fund balance in the last couple of years. However, according to their plan, they may have some technology and furniture needs in fiscal 25. So we have 90,000 appropriated as special payment. We would flow those dollars back out to COCC to administer the purchasing of those items that fit the memorandum of understanding. Any questions about this? Oh, our transfer in is from lottery dollars. County funds, the county portion, we're using lottery dollars. That is. Any questions about this fund? Okay,
So the Crook County School Fund is basically just a pass-through fund. This allows us to pass through a small portion of property taxes that they receive, as well as their portion of the SRS, which is the Secure Rural Schools Act funds. They get the Title I portion of that. So you'll see it is, all the revenue does get sent out as a special payment to the Crook County School Fund or to the Crook County School District with no dollars remaining in this fund. Any questions on that one? The next one, this is a risk management fund, and it was created in 2024, fiscal year 24, to allow the organization to have a fund for risk management activities such as our liability insurance deductible, our workers' comp deductible, and other items that are risk managed across the organization rather than a department. Like, for example, in fiscal year 24, we have the natural hazard mitigation plan that is being paid for by these funds. It's a countywide plan that affects every department and what would happen in the case of disaster. So it was decided that these were good use of those funds. We don't have any planned spending out of this fund in 2025. However, we do have our entire $150,000 deductible for our liability insurance appropriated in case there should be a claim. We have the ability to pay for that claim. The transfers in to this fund for this year, for fiscal 25, are coming from our capital asset reserve, because most of the items in this fund are related to liability claims, normally property or asset related. And then we have a small portion of internal service being recovered from departments. Last year, this fund was funded by a portion from the general fund and then a small chunk from departments as an internal service.
So why is there a contingency on this? I mean, I get putting that 150 in there, similar reasons for efficiency. If you need to write the check, you don't have to go through the process. But it seems like a contingency.
that's a valid point.
It kind of is.
Where were the funds pulled from to pay deductibles prior to this fund being created last year?
So in the history that I've been at the county, which is about 2 plus a couple months years, we didn't really have any big claims. However, the 2 big claims we have were directly related to a department, and those departments were responsible for paying the deductibles on those claims.
And it wasn't budgeted for those departments?
Correct.
Show, you just did it.
So whoever the claim was against had to pay the deductible.
Correct. And that will continue if it's directly related to a department, but for example, if someone accidentally slips and falls on the courthouse steps, that's not really related to a department. That would be something that would be paid out of this fund. However, if there's an issue where something is directly related to the actions of the department, then we go back and decide, is that something that's paid out of here, or is that something the department needs to pay for?
Why did you choose to change the source of funds for this year versus last year?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Part of it was because we felt the initial funding needed to come from the general fund for this fund, as well as from the departments as an internal service fee. And when we looked at what typically gets done from a liability standpoint, it's normally those property and asset liability claims. And so it was felt more to use those reserve funds rather than penalize the general fund as much as we did in the prior year.
Another aspect of that is the capital asset reserve has not really been touched for a while, and so it has just gained interest earnings. And so we're basically scooping some of the interest earnings out of capital reserve. We're not affecting the principal dollars that are held there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, to your point, Bill, about contingency, in our fiscal policy, we have a required amount for net working capital for this particular fund. We don't want to be able to drain it to zero. And so I think, in the idea of making sure that there are some of these risk dollars available, I think we do kind of want that one to have to be a conversation for the commissioners to have if we do have a risk or something that emerges. Unlike the clerk, we need her to take care of her equipment. This one, we do want to have a conversation about that risk and about what it is. So the fiscal policy does require us to keep a certain amount there. And so that is why it's held contingency. If it doesn't make sense, that we, please.
Well, I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think it's just important for us to understand
Yeah.
where they're there and, so the mechanics, what it enables. And also that there isn't like just kind of things slopping around with extra things here or
Correct.
there.
Yeah,
We appreciate you digging into it.
yeah.
Do you have a target ceiling on your total resources for this fund?
I haven't heard.
We have talked about putting one on there, and we've talked about the double the liability insurance deductible. So we're getting fairly close to that. So that would be
Next year.
10,000, yeah. But that's kind of another thing we're also looking at insurance options, and that's kind of part of this fund is determining where we want to be with our risk tolerance as a county. And I think this fund is going to change if that changes. And that cushion that we have here is going to change.
Any other questions? These are great questions. Okay. Special Transportation Fund. This accounts for federal and state special transportation dollars, specifically for things like public transit, transportation for senior citizens, things like that. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council to perform those services. So they are generally the ones who are working with the state and advocating for why we need certain special transportation things. We have this fund to receive the dollars, and then because they are contracted to do the work, then they let us know what these resources, where we're flowing them out. So typically it's for the purchase of buses, for drivers to drive the buses. This fund has been growing over time because COVID really interrupted supply chain management on getting buses. They had challenges hiring people. So they're definitely the agency handling, the boots on the ground work, but these are the resources at their disposal for special transportation.
And Jamie works really closely with the CPA from that organization to determine what they're going to spend and kind of manage.
Yeah, so she let me know what the state's biennium allocation was for this fund and had requested that we make sure we appropriate it all on the off chance that the buses and the drivers and all the pieces come together. So that is what we have done at their request.
Is that Michelle?
Any questions? Okay. The Surveyor Fund. So this accounts for the activity associated with maintaining the county's public land corners and surveying documentation. So revenue is primarily fees from surveying activity, and a portion of reporting fees also goes into this fund. The surveyor is elected, but he's not a county employee. So we actually contract with Kelso Land Surveying, which is owned by the county surveyor, and he handles the surveying operation. So that is why you don't see personnel. Well, it's actually a contracted service of the county. And then
So that begs the question, so who negotiates the contract? with himself?
So right now, the contractor comes for rent. So he doesn't actually get paid by us at the county really other than rent. And
His
then-
fees support the work he does.
But that's a good question. I believe.
Still, I
legal
mean,
counsel.
just the look of it, right? So what if he decided and I'm not accused, I'm just saying, you know, like the worst case scenario, what if he decided to triple his fees? And, because then I don't think it's okay for us to say, well, it's fee supported, so what?
Yeah, our legal counsel works with him on that, and then that contract goes back to the commissioners for review and acceptance.
Okay, so there is.
Yes.
There is a
And we
formal
review his
process
fees,
of it.
yeah.
Okay, good.
I don't think he can't change them without commissioner action, correct? Like, just like any other county fee.
It would be a commission decision.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great question. Any other questions on this one? Okay,
So the Taylor Grazing Fund, this is activity associated with grazing revenue that's generated from federal lands here in Crook County. As required by the ORS, it has its own separate fund, and we have a separate Taylor Grazing Advisory Board that is in charge of determining the activity that uses these dollars. They work in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management's Crooked Valley Grazing District to manage those dollars, and the county is basically just holding entity for them. The entire fund balance is appropriated in this case because historically, while you can see we haven't really spent much, those dollars do need to be available for them if they choose to spend them.
questions on that one?
Title III fund, these are the dollars we receive as part of Secure Rural Schools. They're the Title III dollars. These dollars are very restricted and are typically used for emergency response on public lands. There's a few other small uses for them, such as community wildfire protection plans and fire-wise communities. The big items that are exciting that are being, these dollars are being used for, because as you can see in the past, they've just been used for a few small projects, but not drained that fund. This fund for these dollars, it gets reappropriated or renewed, I guess, by the feds. And this one is sitting in 2026. So if we don't use those funds by 2026 and it doesn't get reappropriated by the state, those funds have to go back to the state. So we try to use them when we can. This year, we're using them for the $300,000 is for a mobile incident command post for the sheriff's office that utilizes a bus, or it's technically a motorhome, that was donated to the sheriff's office. And we also have the remainder of it in materials and services, but we don't plan on spending all of that this year. We have a couple of small projects for weed control that are being involved, as well as our community wildfire protection plan is getting an update this year. And the community wildfire protection plan that's being paid for by Title III and that natural hazard mitigation plan that are being paid for by the risk management fund are both requirements by FEMA for us to be able to get any federal dollars should some type of disaster happen. And we have to update those plans every 5 years. So in the 2025 proposed budget, we're showing the anticipated receipt of funds from the state. Miscellaneous is just the interest on the funds that sit there. And then we have the entire amount appropriated in materials and services with $50,000 in capital outlay if we find projects that fit that. Right now, we only have one project that'll be coming to the commissioners for approval in fiscal year 2025, but we're always looking for projects that fit these requirements. In order to get a project approved for use of Title III funds, it has to go in front of the commissioners and be approved, as well as go through a 45-day public comment period and go through a Forest Service committee that is a public committee for approval as well. So it's got a pretty strict approval process for these funds, but we do appropriate them all in case we would like to use them for the year.
Can you give us the example of the 300,000 expected spend was last year?
So that's not
Or this year.
unexpected. That will be that mobile incident command post.
The 300 is?
So the 300 is the total amount for it. I don't anticipating spending all of it this year, but we have some supply chain challenges that it may cross fiscal years.
Okay.
So we have a total of $300,000 for that project, but we've appropriated enough if all of the bills come in and everything needs to get paid before June 30th. We have the appropriation there. If it doesn't, we have a little bit of appropriation left for anything that spills over to the next fiscal year.
It's not really important, but I'm just curious. I thought I heard you say that the mobile bus, motorhome, whatever was donated.
It was.
Then I see 300,000 and I'm like,
Has to be up.
I wanna go on this ride.
You'll be able to come see it. It's, getting upfit with a lot of technology, so it will literally be a mobile command center.
Like a hotspot.
On, it's more than that, it's like, it's where you can,
Yeah.
you're and it'll be used by sheriff's office, the police department, the fire department, and federal agencies for response on public lands. It'll have Starlink internet, and that was one of the challenges they've been facing, is it's really hard for them to coordinate efforts out in Crook County because it is so rural. And this will allow them to basically take a command post with them. It will have the ability to have beds in the back for our first responders to be able to take a break and get out of the whatever weather they are dealing with at that point, as well as have a direct link back to dispatch. It will have all the computers they need to run, basically be a self-sufficient unit out wherever an emergency is.
Any questions? Right.
So the tourism fund is 3.5% of our transient room tax dollars that are received and are required to be used for tourism and tourism-related activities, and they are accounted for in this fund. We don't have a particular project other than 4th of July fireworks that typically get spent here. However, we do appropriate, you'll see 31,000 appropriated this year for opportunities that may come up for tourism-related support. Any
Does the-
questions on that?
The Chamber of Commerce just switched to a whole tourism deal. I think what I read, and I'm wondering, did they ever draw on this fund, or what potentials people might, company businesses would ask for funding from this?
Yeah, so last year, the year before, we did some money for the playground out of this
We
fund.
discussed it.
We discussed
I don't think
some
it-
funding
I
for
don't
the
think it-
playground. I think it ended up being paid for out of lottery. We paid for some, rodeo board requests out of here last year. This one is.
Tourism marketing in the
Yep, some
current fiscal
tourism
year.
marketing. This one's really restricted and it has to very much be able to be tracked back to tourism dollars that we've brought back into the county. And this is just the county's fund for this, so.
Not to connect, the Chamber couldn't come in and ask for some of the.
Correct, the chamber does get dollars from the next one James talked about, yeah.
Any other questions?
Doesn't the chamber also get a bunch of TRT dollars? So you get a certain percentage that goes to the county,
Correct.
a certain percentage goes to the fairground, a certain percentage goes to the museum, and then
That's true.
also to the
Yeah.
chamber. And that's really a big part of how they run their day-to-day business. And then they also get additional funds in there that they can do grants from the transient room tax dollars. So this is just a 3% of that total. The other 97% is split up between the county, the fairgrounds, the museum, and the chamber.
And the chamber directly, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't even, it doesn't even hit our books, it just goes to the chamber.
Yeah, thank you.
So if we're ready for video lottery fund, this is a fund that gives money to the
Make sure to
chamber.
go out and play video poker.
Right. This fund does account for funding from Oregon Video Lottery. That is the primary revenue for it. The miscellaneous is just interest earnings. For that materials and services, that is the county's dollars going out to both Chamber of Commerce and EDCO, the Economic Development of Central Oregon. And then the transfers, 162,000 of that is about approximately half of the revenue that comes in will go to the fairgrounds. And then the other portion, that 50,000, is what we are giving to the Community College Education Center Fund. So those are the transfers out, the rest we're holding in contingency. And the idea, we really want to be able to use these dollars for economic development or things that would invest in economic development for the county. Any questions on this one?
What percentage of state video lottery funds that are distributed to all counties are you in? I mean, I'm just curious, what piece of whatever the big pie is that Crook County gets out of versus all other counties? Is it based on population or is it based on?
I believe it is based on population, but I'd have to pull up how the state allocates it. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There's a few factors that go into it.
Well, I think they've used a lot of it to bond future projects.
It's kind of the leftover.
Yeah, it's whatever's left over, because that's why they got in such a pinch during COVID, because they assumed that there would never be, it would never drop below 20%. And then when nobody was going to bars and couldn't play video poker, they were like, oh no, it's now below 20%, we're in real trouble. And so, yeah, it's a lot more complicated than just all the money comes in and then it's split amongst all the counties. I think the state takes a hearty.
Oh, they do, that's, but out of the pool of these available funds is what I probably the population. maybe.
Yeah.
We can look into a better answer for you on that.
Well, I can get you a list of what every county receives. I get it. I just don't normally pay attention to it because some of the counties is a lot and
Sure.
we get a fairly small county, so.
Any other questions on this one? Okay. That is the small special revenue funds. We're now ready for Katie and the Health and Human Services portion of the, we're gonna go into, so we'll go into a series of department presentations. There will be a break kind of partway through, and then we will complete the department presentations. There will be another break, and then there will be time for public comment, or actually public comments before the break, and then there will be time for discussion. Katie, if you wanna, do you wanna sit, do you wanna stand, you can be wherever you want.
Oh, I'll do Nancy to sit, but I'll.
Okay.
If you're gonna run the.
Sounds great. I will run the slides for you. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm
Go ahead.
I'm Katie Kwan, I'm the Health and Human Services Director for the county. Thank you for having me. And is that what you were
So
saying?
I was gonna launch right into the numbers and
Yeah, you were.
introduction was a better idea. So here's the Health and Human Services Fund. It is a contained fund that includes dollars for public health, environmental health, and mental health. I will start with the mental health in particular, that is flow through dollars. So intergovernmental revenue that comes in equally matches the mental health dollars that go out. So we have it in this fund, and I just highlight that because if you can kind of mentally push that 4.677 million out of the intergovernmental revenue, that is flow through dollars. The rest is the operation that Katie specifically has with the public health and environmental health. So primary source of revenue is federal, state, local, and private grant dollars that do fund those initiatives, plus $500,000 from the general fund for support, both for matching and just community support. And then within public health and environmental health, we are funding positions and the contracts to do those services that Katie can expound on more. In this particular year, we do have a slight reduction in FTE of personnel, mostly due to COVID funding that has dropped off. Those dollars are expiring. And then environmental health has increased pretty significantly in this year because we have to replace a vehicle. Other than that, it is business as usual for the 1.1 FTE that handle that piece of the program. The other thing to note is we are adding a deputy director who is being partially funded out of the mental health dollars, and then partially out of the public health dollars. So anything else? Feel like those are the biggie. Okay.
Were there any questions?
Just a quick question. So the mental health portion of this, that doesn't fund any of the juvenile programs, does it? Is this all just adult?
Well, it does fund youth behavioral health programming through Best Care. So Best Care is the contract that we have for community mental health provider. So these funds provide the services in that order health program. Some of those are geared towards youth, and actually some of the public health funds that I receive, I subcontract to support the counselor at school-based health center as well.
Thank you.
Who does, so much of this comes from outside sources, your funding. do you have like a grant writer, or how do you manage farm that? That's you, that's what you do? I mean, it's really kind of a farming thing, right? Because you have to be aware of all the opportunities that are out there and what to do.
Yes, I'm really grateful for a deputy position. Yeah, and I have, I'm building staff so that there are multiple people in the department that can manage their own grant funding streams. So that there is more capacity than just myself at the moment.
Is it possible that, yeah, a position like that could be self-funded? I mean, the effort put into that, you would gain the ability to access.
We are at max capacity with the funds that we're currently pulling in, and actually, majority of that deputy position is grant funded, plus there's public health grant funds, and then there's the mental health grant funds, so it already is essentially self-sustaining through grant funding. Yes, we could get more. It is really hard to chase dollars. And to run programming, I think that's in my challenges on the next slide, is to run programming on 1-year grant cycle, 2-year, even 5-year grant cycles are challenging, and when they're all offset. Having a strong mission and a strong strategic plan is what keeps us on track with so many different funding streams, because all those funders have priorities too.
Right. So you're kind of living to the next grant renewal or whatever. So do you see that impacts your ability, or how does it impact staffing? Because if you live in that environment and you don't know whether you're gonna have a job because the grant happens to go over here.
I would say that my staff have a lot of trust in me and the process and the system. We've never had to lay anyone off due to a grant ending, because we're always looking for that next grant. We have had, like with the COVID funding, that sunsetting, but you know, we would have part-time nurses through our COVID dollars, and so we don't need the part-time nursing staff for normal programming right now. It's hard on staff, it's hard on me, and it's the nature of the beast. Every single local public health department is set up in this way, so my colleagues feel the same pinch, and it blows the rest of the medical community's mind when I show them how we're funded.
Sorry about that.
Sure, yes, in spite of all of that, and part of bringing in some sustainable funding, we were able to sit down in negotiations with Pacific Source, our Medicaid provider for Central Oregon, and negotiate a per member per month payment, which means we don't have to set up, I went through the negotiation process, but I don't have to set up a grant report. The funds are directed towards a specific program, our perinatal care coordination program. But that is a steady revenue stream that comes in now on we'll negotiate it every year, but it's a consistent funding source for us. It is exciting to be able to have shuffled funding to prioritize the deputy director position. We've increased access to our sexually transmitted infections testing and decreased costs. Actually, we were having to go through St. Charles labs or through the state public health lab for everything. We brought in Quest Diagnostics that has significantly reduced our costs, increased our turnaround time, which means people are getting treated more quickly through that service. And we've got grant funds for this to add some lab interfaces, which reduces the amount of work that our nurses are doing to input lab requests, because our electronic health record talks directly to the labs. So we're doing as much as we can to streamline and take administrative burden off of our staff so they can do things like be nurses.
I'm curious, the perinatal care position, that required a Pacific Source or any Medicare provider to provide that service by Medicare, or is it because you have a footprint already here that you can do it? Probably, yeah, even though Pacific Source is ostensibly a nonprofit, I mean, they're all for profit, so you could do what they're doing cheaper and that's why they're paying you kind of thing? Is that kind of how that works?
We piloted this program, it's about 7 years in the running, we ran it off of grant funds for that long through Central Oregon Health Council, which is the community outreach arm of Pacific Source. So they grant funded that program. When the grant sunset is when, well, we did all things like they're now billing, we are billing for those services, some of them. The work that that position does helps Pacific Source meet quality incentive metrics. So yeah, it's an investment on them and a fairly, it's a good investment on their part.
They're saving money by having you guys do that work versus them having to create the footprint in essence of doing it.
Potentially, they don't have to do it in this particular manner. They could do it directly through, like OBGYN clinics and that, but, this is more of a wrap service. So we're the only lactation consultant in the county right now. So we wrap in WIC, services. So it's a little bit more robust than Pacific Source would be able to offer just on their own. Yeah, sure. I think I've mentioned a lot of these, the field changes rapidly. It changes at the whims of the federal government. It changes at the whims of state government. And so, we work really hard to stay rooted in local health conditions, local, priorities. But the funding does move around that, and it is a significant amount of change at any given time. We are in 2 buildings right now. We have a staff of a little over 30 full and part-time, and that exceeds our current capacity in our clinic space. So we are also in a building kind of kitty corner to us, and that dynamically is challenging, but we're making it work.
One of the things I want to add is I'm on health council, and this last meeting, I think it was last Thursday, Mosaic, we rent from Mosaic. And they want to bring in dental capabilities to Crook County. So our lease expires in 1.5 years. And one of the things we've got to get hot on is I met Megan from Mosaic. And she is very interested in us coming together and coming up with a solution and trying to form a campus-like setting. Much like Madras kind of. So I was very positive about that. It's gonna take money. It's gonna take us working together, but at least that first step, and so within 1.5 years, we're going to have to, Katie's life is gonna change drastically, so we've got to figure that out.
Yeah, Mosaic has started offering their pharmacy services, and so and that is growing, and it's definitely a big need, as well as dental will be huge to have Mosaic offer that. But it does kind of edge us out.
Yeah, we gotta kind of join in.
The beauty is that we share so many patients, and we can literally walk patients or just providers across the hallways. And so as far as the coordination of care, it's really positive for us to be co-located, and we would love to stay on a campus or close by. These are all of our services. They range from our clinical reproductive health services and immunizations to pandemic response, an emergency type response, the mobile instant command system that is being built. We have a footprint or a foot in any health related work during an emergency. We do have our family health that I mentioned, perinatal care is part of. We have a robust team of nurse home visitors, so regardless of income, whether you make 2 million a year or nothing, we support nurses going in and supporting new families, and that's available to everyone in Crook County. Our prevention and health promotion team is, in my humble opinion, one of the most important services that we offer, because if we can prevent some of the issues that we're seeing in clinics and in hospital rooms, that's the work that that team is doing. Making sure that those video lottery funds don't actually end up costing someone their house. Some of those more extreme health issues are what we're looking at with that team. And then our environmental health is expanding. We do have our restaurant and pool inspections, in public spaces and, also looking at health effects of smoke and droughts and a variety of other just environmental factors that influence our well-being.
You guys do restaurant inspections?
We do, yeah, our regulatory arm of environmental health is, restaurant licensing and inspections.
Same thing the state's doing, or?
No, we do it locally.
The
all of
state
that
does
happens.
locally too, don't they do that?
Not for restaurant licensure or kitchen inspections. They may for other, like, we don't do any of the alcohol work or, trying to think what else we might. We respond to Indoor Clean Air Act, so any smoking within 10 or 20 feet of a door window, we do that piece.
Oh, just curious, your position going to 0.9 FTE?
You'll see the 0.1 in another budget, in our veteran services budget.
So, is it correct that you're not decreasing your work by a tenth?
Correct.
You're just
It will be
donating
paid
it to
out
that
of,
position.
it will be paid out of another fund. So we'll see better.
I should have highlighted that, yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming.
It just, yeah.
Katie needs to increase her.
I'm sure you're not.
Not increase, no. Or Katie.
Yeah, I think we're good. We talked about the vehicle for environmental health. Mental health, part of this that we're looking forward to going into the next fiscal year is with that deputy director position. It allows, depending on who we get in, it would allow either me or that person to increase coordination with our contracted behavioral health service and all of the other county entities like the sheriff's office, the DA's office, juvenile department. We're hoping to better support the efficiency of those relationships and the robustness of them. We have a legislatively mandated community health advisory council that we've ramped up in their support for our community mental health program. So they're responsible for accountability that our behavioral health contractor is meeting objectives and then reporting that back out to the board of commissioners. Any other questions about health and human services?
Not, we'll launch right into veteran services and Katie's not going anywhere because this is also hers, so. Yeah, so numbers for this one. The Veteran Services Fund comes from the Oregon Department of Veteran Affairs. It is allocated based on the population of veterans in Crook County. And then it is, well, it's not one-for-one match, but general fund support funds the rest of it. So, as you can see, the general fund support for fiscal year 25 is $161,000. For personnel, our big change this year is that we are formally allocating 10% of Katie's time to this fund because she has been overseeing it now for the current fiscal year and continuing next fiscal year. And then the materials and services are for outreach and personnel includes two other employees, so. What you, the rest of it.
Yeah, I was so excited to have one challenge in this space because it has been challenging for some time to keep our services active in the county locally. And so to now we have a full-time veteran service officer and a full-time administrative staff. One of the things we're noting and would be the only challenge related to staffing is that when our VSO is doing outreach or wants to take a vacation, it would be helpful to have someone be able to backfill and be a local point of contact for those services. So that'll be something that we're already exploring. It can be something that we can use grant funds to offset potentially in next fiscal year outreach time, and then be able to pull in some additional capacity to file claims. But that is a good place to be in, to just have one struggle in that space right now. Because we have that is very much due to recruiting staff members that are fantastic at what they do and very passionate about the work. We have drastically increased the number of veterans that are physically coming into our space, calling in, compared when I look at the reports for the last couple of years, they're, Tom gets so excited, he's like, Katie, I'm gonna double this by the time we're done. So that's, we're really proud of that work. These are the services, it runs the gamut. Our current veteran service officer has a lot of experience in the housing space and a lot of connections across Central Oregon to get veterans what they need, but, they essentially have to be experts in, all of the services that are provided and available to veterans, not just the ones that we're required to provide, because they end up being that one point of contact for our veteran to find out what all is available to them.
It's a continuation.
We partner with local organizations and regional organizations as well as the state to make sure that all of these things are covered.
Should be, any questions?
I think we're doing a big policy and procedure overview, which is super exciting, but to be able to have the veteran staff in that space and create some more structure for that department is exciting to see, to increase this sustainability of that office so that they have processes in place if someone new does come in anytime soon, as well as they get all of the supports from the prevention and health promotion team and our quality improvement team. That it, that's all?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you got a break. You made it to the break?
We are a little bit behind schedule. Do you all need a quick break? Okay, we'll just keep going then. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, so road department. Do you want to give an introduction?
Sure. I'm Brad Haynes, Crook County Road Department.
All right. So here's the road fund, and it's contained within itself. And the primary source of funding is the state fuel tax, as well as secure rural schools funding. So that is the big number that's up there. Personnel includes 20.2 FTE. That 0.2 is for some overlap during a retirement, transition to that piece. The materials and services is primarily road maintenance. And then capital outlay this year will include some a real grader, snow plows and sander. The transfer out is dollars going to the community development fund for the transportation system plan and a Juniper Canyon feasibility access study. So those are the primary dollars. We have a large amount that we keep in reserve for future expenditure.
So you might have some questions on what the relife with the equipment is. The relife of the equipment is versus a brand new is taking a 99 used grader and having it totally rebuilt for about half the cost, a little less than half the cost of a brand new. So we're gonna relife it to brand new condition, put it back in fleet and not replace it. So, the snowplow, we're gonna get trying to get two extended snowplows that instead of having the wing system that goes out to the side of the back of the truck versus this one goes out and it actually extends out the front. It seems to be a safer product for wider roads like Milliken Highway or Bellevue Highway. Instead of doing 4 passes to get the road completely clear, we'll hopefully do it in 1 pass and be more efficient in our swing blocking conditions. And we have 2 sanders that are rolling over from last year. They haven't got here yet. They should be here probably in November of this year. And the snow plows themselves are probably, what are they, Robert,
400 days.
400 days out after we order it. So we got over a year to be in play. So we are 1 position short up there, a mechanic's position, supervisor's position, we're currently trying to fill out right now. And so that'll give us, a supervisor in the mechanic's position, and then we'll hire a technician under that, so we'll have 3 mechanics. Right now, we're putting in a lot of overtime because of the 2 mechanics that we have. We still have services breakdowns, so they'll work 5 days instead of 4. Some of the projects, the notable projects that we did last year is the South Powell Butte area chip seal is completed, and this year we're gonna work on getting the Barnes Butte overlay from Barnes Butte Road to Highway 126 to complete that section there, and then the chip seal from Willard Road, which is county line, to Highway 27 out on the Reservoir Road. And that'll be a chip seal. We're out there currently right now, kind of making it safe for us to do chip seals on, sealing it up. And then we'll do chip seal from George Milliken roundabout or city limits all the way out to county line, Deschutes County line. So that's the notable projects that we got going on this year. Any questions?
On your grader rebuild, you expect to get another 25 years out of the grader on the rebuild? What's it like?
We go by hours, another 10,000 hours.
Do you think you'll get another 10,000 hours out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we will. They're a $20,000 frame, so 20,000 hours. And the components are all new pumps, you know, you can get new glass and stuff like this, but it gives a new paint job, new bushings to the controls, new pumps, and, you just tighten the total bushings and stuff, so new transmission seal and stuff like that. So it's quite a program the Caterpillar put in, plus it gets an extended warranty. What's the warranty extension on that, Robert, do you remember? Jake?
5,000 hours?
Yeah, something like 5,000 hours of warranty extension on it. So it's less than half the price of a brick.
How do you coordinate with, the state as well? Because, we have highways that come through, and we have some work on the highways, or is that a total state?
Well, it's like state highway, like, Highway 126.
Yeah.
No, we don't do any work on that. We work up to the right of way, and then the state has to work on that, so. Anytime we come up to the state highway or another county agency, we have to get permissions and permits to work that.
Well, I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. I got a really good crew, so
Yeah, with the snow removal and things that I see, it's amazing.
thank you. I'll let them know.
Well, hopefully that'll get my driveway. It's prior.
What's your driveway at?
I'll give you my head.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, community development.
Yeah. Good times I could ask that.
You want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
As well, since we have a budget committee.
Good morning, my name is Will Van Baxter, I am the Community Development Director.
Alright, so here is Will's budget for community development. It is primarily a fee-based revenue that comes into this one for permits and the fees related to that. This fund is appropriated based on department functions, so we have building, code enforcement, electrical, on-site, controlling, it's alphabetical. Doesn't make sense programmatically, but it's alphabetical. Building obviously is the large one, and we do have an anticipated spend down of fund balance this year. In February of 23, so a little bit over a year ago, we did do a tail study. Finance and community development worked together on a tail study to determine what was the dollar amount that we would anticipate spending down because of the permit obligations to those biggest projects like the Apples and Facebooks and other large projects in the Hill. And at that point in time, we identified it would cost us about 3.6 million to continue funding, paying personnel to make sure we met those obligations. So we very much anticipate CD dollars continue to go down. Obviously, there's still other work and still revenue that comes in, but I just wanted to make you aware we are watching the spend down and it is on track. So within the departments, like I said, they're appropriated by division, and there is a general decrease compared to fiscal year 24, primarily to economic activity slowing a bit. But still maintaining staffing to fulfill permit obligations. The majority of the funds stay reserved for future expenditure. Oh, and we are planning to replace 6 vehicles in this budget. Timing wise, not sure if they'll come in by June 30 or if they'll come in next year, but we have the dollars for those vehicle replacements.
Thanks, Jamie. So I have, these slides kind of broken up, by division within community development. You see up there, we have, I kind of break out the positions in each one of the divisions, just to give a little context to the numbers that Jamie was just discussing, kind of, building's clearly the largest of the division, it's most expensive for us to, maintain and operate. So that's kind of how these next couple slides are broken out, but, building's been busy, our building official works really hard at making sure our building inspectors maintain their certifications, so that they can provide all the services we need to provide, from inspecting the tiny home to a data center and doing all the plan review in between. So maintaining our certifications is important, so 13 new, certifications this fiscal year. On the planning side, we restructured the planning department a little bit this fiscal year. We had a planning manager position that we eliminated. I think we created a senior planning position and an associate planner position. And we eliminated 1 senior permit technician position from the planning department. So this reflects the current status of the planning department. For a little reference, in terms of permit activity for kind of the whole department, but in particular planning. Last year, the same slide said that we had received 332 land use applications the same time period, so very significant decrease even over the last year, and that's a trend we've seen by the last at least 18 months. So permit activity continues to be slow. Oh,
You figured it out.
Read my slide, it's not correct. On-site, big highlight that I should have called out on this slide that I did not, is our county sanitarian is now fully licensed and registered with the state. We completed all of these necessary training and education. That's important for budget purposes because in the past we've had to have full contract sanitarian on call to assist while our county sanitarian works towards that certification. So we were able to get rid of that. They're going to agreement this year. Compliance, no changes here. 1 compliance officer. Staying busy with compliance cases. So just because permit activity slows down doesn't mean that compliance cases go away. So staying busy there. Operations, so our operations, there's not a separate line in the budget for our operations division. These positions are all funded from the building paying on-site divisions. But one highlight for operations is we were able to successfully recruit Katrina Weedman from Jefferson County to be our operations manager. We were able to hire her last July. And if you have any hard questions about the budget, she's here to help me out there. So still doing it. Macroeconomic, well, here's some of the challenges we face. These don't really change year to year necessarily, but macroeconomic factors, including inflation and interest rates, those have a kind of direct impact on how much permit activity we see each year. Supply chain, as Jamie mentioned earlier, we've got a number of vehicles in the budget. Part of that is the result of not being able to get vehicles in past fiscal years, including fiscal year 23. So we're hoping we're gonna get 4 of them before the end of this fiscal year, but we'll see. The good news is they're at least on the way and being built, so we should receive them soon. Another challenge is just general development slowdown as a fee-dependent department. When permit activity dries up or slows down, our revenue decreases in some instances pretty significantly. Staffing, I'm sure you guys have heard this from other departments, but that's another challenge for community development. We're not actively recruiting any positions right now, in part because we're taking kind of a conservative approach to hiring vacancies. In fact, I think we've eliminated 8 positions from our budget this year, not through layoffs or anything along those lines, just by taking them out of the budget. So we're not actively recruiting, but when it's time to recruit, it's always a challenge to find the right folks, especially when you're competing with the Shoots in Jefferson County for the same positions, and they pay in many instances more than we're able. Regulatory changes, this is just a constant for our department, whether it's building, planning, on-site. The state is always up to something, whether it's related to housing, wildfires, there's constantly new regulations that we need to be aware of so that we can make sure we're updating our codes and the correct regulatory scheme. So this is just a highlight of the services we provide. The building department administers and implements all applicable state, board, and specialty codes, provides plan review services, and also provides inspection services for the city of Prineville. Planning department implements state law and the county's comprehensive plan by issuing land use decisions. We adopt code updates, including some that you'll see here shortly related to accessory dwelling units out on rural residential lands. That's a big change to our allowed uses in rural residential zones. And the planning department also plans for the future of Crook County through its long range planning program. Through planning efforts like the transportation system plan update, comprehensive plan updates here and there, and then Title 17, which is our land divisions ordinance, which is ready for that. Sorry. No, you're good. That was perfect timing.
Okay.
On-site regulates wastewater treatment systems, provide inspections, design, review, permitting inspections. Compliance, this is a code enforcement program. Ensures compliance with our building code, land use ordinance, but also the county's nuisance ordinance. So the code enforcement officer kind of touches on anything code related for the county. If necessary, if we're unable to achieve voluntary compliance, eventually the code compliance officer will take cases in front of the hearings officer that we have on contract to hear code compliance violations. And then the operations division serves as initial contact with the public, provides direct service to the public. They coordinate all the services between the divisions within community development. So we're coordinating efforts between the planning and building and on-site programs to ensure that we are conveying the correct information to the public. Is that it?
The one thing I didn't mention, but meant to highlight on the numbers, is that this is gonna be the first year that general fund is going to give compliance $30,000 in a transfer, specifically because of some of those nuisance things that really impact the entire county. So we do have budgeted a $30,000 transfer specifically for that program.
So just a couple quick comments before we wrap up with community development. So I didn't mention this in the highlights, but we were able this last fiscal year to adopt a strategic plan for community development, which we are in the process of implementing. And last year with our fee updates, we were able to include for the first time an advanced planning fee, which will help fund a lot of our long range planning efforts. And that fee, I just wanted to note, has worked as we intended it to. Permit activity has been slow, so we haven't collected quite as much as I anticipated, but it's worked as intended and provides a critical additional revenue stream for the planning department.
One of the notes in here was, you have ongoing, you know that there are projects out there, so I presume those are like multi-year things that you collected fees for. So is it's kind of an accounting question, but are those amortized out over the period of that project, or do they just take it all up front? And then we got to make sure that we're keeping positions covered.
They're taken up front.
So they're not associated with the work that's being done.
Correct, and that's part of that piece or the
The tail
tail
study.
study that was done to confirm that those funds are being held in that fund balance to allow us to cover the work that needs to be done that was paid up front for those fees. So it's not exactly being amortized, but it is being taken into consideration when we're looking at that beginning fund balance because those fees all came in prior years. They need to cover continuing operations.
Okay, yeah, because I can see that as an issue, right? If things really slow down, the revenues and the whole savings and loan industry went down.
It's that revenue philosophy. Do you collect it all up front so that you have it and then you continue to do the work? Or do you piecemeal it because a person might have the money at the start of the project, but if something happens, they need to continue paying for their permits and fees, but they can't. It's just kind of a philosophy of when to collect it,
Yeah,
right?
and this was something that we discussed maybe a couple budgets ago where we had this pretty significant reserve account. And one of the budget committee members kind of had a question, well, what's the plan for that money? So I really appreciate the finance department helping us kind of sift through that and figure out, okay, we know we've got enough data at this point to know how long the projects take and what kind of work is going to be required from them and ultimately how long they're gonna take. So how do we kind of plan to make sure we have that money in 2025? So,
Well, I appreciate it. It helps explain why that fund balance is there. And is that's the reason it's decreasing over time and we actually kind of goes underwater with the projection?
Yes, for now.
Right.
I'm curious, because of the primary fee and permit driven funding source, I'm sure this predates you, but do you have any idea what the FTE was for your department prior to like in the last recession versus now? I mean,
I just asked in like 2010.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head.
has your department run it all in FTEs during your?
It has reduced in my time. So I've been here for 3 years. We were over 30 FTEs when I started, and we're down to closer to 25. Yeah,
It's kind of organically.
organically, yeah. And, you know, as a permit or as a, permit activity driven department, not just fee wise, but in terms of how much activity we have going on, some of that makes sense, right? As things slow down, you're not gonna have as much work, so you don't necessarily need to go out and rehire just because somebody retires or something. It's whatever.
Kind of takes care of itself.
It does, but it's something you gotta kind of track and be aware of. I think we're at a really healthy spot right now in terms of being able to provide the necessary services we need to provide as a department, without being overstaffed. So I think we're in a good spot now.
So Will, along those same lines, your inspection staff has almost been cut in half, going from 13 to 7.8. I think is what your building inspector, FTE head count looks like today. Was that on site? Building inspector. I know hiring is an extreme challenge across all sectors. Is there a good availability of qualified inspectors to come in and hit the ground running in the event you have to ramp back up, or contract services that you could employ?
There are contract services, but it's a challenge to find, a fully certified building inspector who's available and ready and able to come work for us. Our practice since I've been here has been to, in some cases out of necessity, just to hire somebody who's anxious and excited about becoming a building inspector. And we fund the education and the necessary experience to get them to a point where they're certified and able to provide the services
And
we need.
what's the timeline for having someone certified?
Katrina.
It really varies. It kind of depends what courses they decide to take. They can go through ICC, you can kind of self-study and take a test and then go that route and then do the hands-on training with other staff that we have. Or you can go through some of the state programs, but those are running about a 24-week course. So it takes a while by the time you go through building, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and then you're doing residential and commercial. So it can definitely take a while.
It's not a quick process, and that's one of the challenges that our building official is kind of constantly struggling and balancing is tracking, okay, where are our building inspectors right now in terms of their certification, what are they, what services are they by the county? And planning ahead, not knowing exactly what the future holds, but if a, data center comes in with a new building or retrofit of some sort, and we're not on staff, that can put us in the tough spot kind of right away, so we need to be planning ahead for that to a certain extent, while also being conservative and not overstretching into hiring.
You also mentioned that our pay structure was lower than Jefferson and Deschutes County. What percentage lower are we on average on our pay structure from Deschutes and Jefferson?
I haven't done the math to know the percentage, but it's.
Is it pennies or dollars?
Dollars. especially, I'm more familiar with Jefferson's, in terms of what their building inspectors are getting paid and what their planners are getting paid and shoes. But they would also be most comparable to the size and machines. There's
Thank you.
Steve, I don't have the numbers for 2010, but on page 208, there is a history from 2013 forward. And I don't have the breakout by position, but community development had 11 FTE in 2015 and then have ramped up as the economy ramped up. Right, so there is that piece. I don't have a slide for it, but today.
I'm not economically prognosticating a recession, I was just curious.
Not one like that.
No.
Are there any other questions for community development for Will?
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like a break now.
All right, yeah, let's take a break.
Well, when I went and got my coffee, because I know you're on break.
Yeah, we are a little bit behind schedule, but let's still do a 5-minute break if that works for everybody. So we'll be back at 10:16.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute. When we do the
Hey, we budget for like it's all, you know. I mean, it's cool, it should.
All right, we're gonna begin again.
She's feeling it.
Okay, and we're back.
Okay.
And
That's
17.
building stuff.
That's all right.
My wife's anniversary.
Good morning, Sarah Beeler, Crook County Library, happy to be here.
Hello.
And thank you, Finance Department, for all your work on this.
So this is the library fund, and it is primarily property tax supported. It also includes resources for the law library, donations, and some other things. As far as FTE goes, this budget does have an increased FTE of 0.54. But there's also, I'll let Sarah go into detail, but there has been a reorganization of positions. Some full-time benefited positions have been converted to part-time positions for the services of the library. In materials and services, there has been a little bit of an increase for collection development primarily, and then costs associated with operating the bookmobile. So I guess one thing I'd like to highlight is that we are growing fund balance and have been, which is really good news considering some of Sarah's plans. So I'll let you.
Thank you, Jamie. We are nearing completion of our new strategic plan. We hope to have that finalized by the end of June. And I'll give you some highlights of what's coming out of that. It will be our guiding document on where we spend our funds and how those funds are allocated. I'll give you a paragraph on what each of those new roles mean, because it might be a little vague. The first one, Learning Central. The Library of the Future is the place that instantly comes to mind when people want to learn anything and everything throughout their lives. It is a place that supports young people's learning from birth through teen years, their parents and teachers too. Library staff help individuals find what they need to know in print and digital collections. They help match individuals to online courses and trainings, including those that are free to library users. The library provides programs of interest to the community, such as on health and wellness, emerging technology, and is a portal to the region and world of learning through offerings that are generally free to library users. The second new role is community inspiration. The Library of the Future enriches the lives of residents with events and performances that entertain, celebrate, and inspire the community. Examples are author visits, poetry and storytelling events, musical events, dramatic performances, and historical and cultural displays and festivals. These events renew spirits, inspire creativity, and build community. And I will mention that this library in the past has been mostly focused on the services right in Prineville. It is a county library, and part of our goals moving forward will be to promote those services throughout the county. We did hire a new part-time, no benefits outreach librarian to serve in Linen Post. We are delighted to have her. That is one of the reasons why we have the bookmobile up and running now. And also we are in the process of hiring a part-time, no benefits person to serve Palview, Ochoco West. We got plans for Juniper Canyon, but that might be premature. And then community magnet. The library of the future is a destination for everyone in the community. Its location in Prineville, along with possible future locations, make it more convenient for people throughout the county. Its online presence makes services available from wherever people are in the county. Its welcoming presence makes it a place where people meet, plan, connect, use services, belong, recreate, learn, and grow. And here are some of our goals. In our new strategic plan, we had key informant interviews, we had a task force, we had town hall meetings, and we had over 400 surveys returned to us. And so we are feeling pretty confident that that was a good sampling and a good litmus test for which direction we should take moving forward. I will say on the bottom one, we were able to internally promote one of our full-time employees to be our new teen services librarian. And we're excited about that. That was a gap. So our highest level goals will be to expand our user base. The number of cardholders reflect that most of the services in our county library system have been offered right around Prineville. So our goal is to move that out into the rural parts of the community and make sure those people know that they have library services. And also to increase our number of card holders.
Can you expand on your developing your virtual library experience?
I can. Right now, we have a couple of options for online materials, and they are amazing. Because out with your Crook County Library card, you can have access to probably 850,000 additional items. Physical items in our library are about 50,000. So what we have are services that we purchase. They're like a subscription service from Overdrive. We have been purchasing those through Deschutes County or Public Library, but we found that, and you know, I think their offerings are about 37,000 ebooks and so forth. We found that by moving to purchasing Overdrive materials through Libraries of Eastern Oregon, they have negotiated an even better rate. And so for a drastically reduced amount of money, I think it was 7,300 and some change, we were able to increase our offerings in ebooks from 37,000 to 49,000. And we were paying in excess of $40,000 through Deschutes, and we have been able to drop that price down to below 10,000. That also includes in both places where we're purchasing e-content, over 4,000 magazines that people have access to. So our online options are robust. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I would just, as you mentioned, you know, your far-flung Crook County service that you're enhancing, I was wondering how that came into play versus a physical bookmobile and such, because obviously, if you suggest the distribution costs are profoundly lower. I wondered how that augmented the physical.
They dovetail nicely. What I want is for people, if they live in Costa Rica, for example, if they see that bookmobile, they know Donna out there. And if you were to ask them, do you have library services in your area? They're gonna say yes. And before we've taken these steps, I think the answer would have been no.
Right. Or,
Go ahead.
okay.
So those are our two high-level goals. We're right in the midst of this transition. So far it's going well. We've advertised heavily. We sent out emails to all of our Overdrive users, and we're happy so far with that transition, and it'll save us money. We have had a hard time, especially when you try to hire somebody part-time, no benefits, to get those positions filled. Brianna has been a tremendous help to us, and we were able to hire teen intern this summer. And we have interviews for a part-time circulation person, no benefits coming up. We were able to take one full-time unfilled position and turn that into a few part-time, no benefits positions just to get out into the county. And we're hoping to have that position at some point in the next few years rebuild again, but that was where we got the money to do it. I think that's all. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll say this, Sarah is very enthusiastic, and every time I go in the library, the other day, I asked if I could just put my office there because it's peaceful and happy, and everyone has a smile on their face.
We do have a good time.
Yeah, thank you. We're so lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Fairgrounds.
Good morning, Casey Daly, from the Fairgrounds Director. Morning, how are you? Good.
Today, Kate's probably had the closest commute today. Right, yeah, it's backyard.
You know, I have one complaint, why, since it's a beautiful day, are we under the
You
tent
could.
and we're in this room? Yeah.
Well, PowerPoints and all that,
Oh,
lame excuses, right?
It's not your fault.
So here's the fairgrounds fund. The taxes that are there mostly are transient room tax or that tourism tax, as well as some other, like some residual little state things that they get. Intergovernmental is a capital improvement grant that we received a couple years ago, and this is the continued spend down of that. And then transfers and interfund, those are general fund support, as well as the revenue that is coming over from the video lottery fund. And then it's in miscellaneous, there are interest earnings there, but actually a larger portion of the dollars there are fair sponsorships. They're more of a donation than any other category, and so they are lumped in with the miscellaneous there. On the spending side, personnel does include a 0.15 FTE increase for event, like temporary event help. But the costs are also increasing pretty dramatically from prior years because several of our full-time benefit employees have chosen different election of benefits. So haven't dramatically changed staffing, just what benefit options they've chosen, and it's caused a big dollar difference. On the materials and services side, that is primarily fair, as well as just the repair, maintenance, and operations of the overall fairground and all its facilities. That capital outlay is, again, that investment in the capital infrastructure, mostly grant funded. Those dollars are not exactly equal because some of the materials and services, there are smaller equipment purchases that are not, they don't qualify as capital, but the infrastructure grant will cover them. So those are the numbers.
And so my biggest challenge is the operational deficit that we try to work on every year. Our buildings are, the newest building currently, we built in 2012. Everything else is from the 70s and 80s. We have a brand new jockey room that's being constructed right now. That'll be our newest when it's completed. And it's challenging to keep the facility going, just putting Band-Aids on it. So we work on that every day. We're exploring new revenue sources. The fees for rental fees have all been upped 20% across the board. It wasn't received very well, but it was something that we had to do. We are completing our master plan, expanding our rental space. Most of this is revenue generating. We're in discussion with partners for the transit room tax to maybe get that increased a little bit. And we continue to upgrade the indoors and outdoor arenas. The indoor arena is the most rented facility that we have. There's a lot of events that happen in town that have outgrown Kerry Foster Hall, which was built in like I said, in 79. They're opting to go into the barn and decorate it in different ways to, at the end of the day, it's a horse barn. So, but you put a little lipstick on it and people seem to like it that way. We're refreshing aging equipment. We typically don't have the resources to buy brand new, so we end up buying used equipment, and sometimes that comes with a challenge. And we just continue to work on that and continue to upgrade the fairgrounds when we can. Annual fair, this past year, our auction sale generated $1.2 2 million for the community, so we're very proud of that. The Oregon Travel Sources estimates with the 90,000 visitors that come through the fairgrounds every year, we have a $5.5 million direct economic impact on the community. With that said, I take any questions you might have.
When does the capital improvement grant run out?
There's no restriction on time frame for that one. It just runs out when the dollars run out.
When is that?
So,
It was just one lump sum.
yeah, it was like
Right.
$2 million.
It's 2 million?
So how,
It's anticipated to be spent.
And that's pretty much all the intergovernmental funds we're seeing here?
correct,
And so I guess I was just looking at that going, that's not gonna last long, and I assume that the capital outlay needs to probably outlast that.
Yeah,
And that's a big chunk of money, and so where's continuing capital outlay
So
going to come from after that?
one of the things that I'm pursuing, and I'm hoping to be successful, is I've been walking across the street to the city of Crockville. Because when you come down here and you have a high school rodeo and there's this whole fairgrounds is full, you go downtown and you see parents with children with cowboy hats walking up and down the street. And Steve Forrester will be one of the first to tell you that his Subway sandwich shop increases dramatically. So yes, we need an event center in Crook County or City of Prineville, but right now this is our game in town. And so what I am advocating is for the city and us to join hands and get together and work together, because no, Casey works as hard as he can and stretches his dollar as far as he can, but we need help. We have aging restrooms, we have a lot of things. So it's time for, so according to Steve, he was going to city council and they were gonna start doing appropriation, because you're right, we're going down the drain here and we need to get help. That's kind of that's my kind of remedy, which what I tell Steve is this armored car is outside. And he tells me you're only getting a briefcase, and I say, I want a satchel. So one of these days, I'm gonna rent an armored car and get a big satchel and go.
If you look at the percentage of nights, heads and beds at hotels versus the TRT dollars the city's receiving, it's pretty dramatic what the fairgrounds is bringing
To the city.
at a very conservative amount. And so those are dollars that are directly going to the city, because TRT dollars go into the area. Anything outside this county, outside of the city limits goes to the county, everything inside. But most of the people that are coming to the fairgrounds are going to local
Well,
hotels.
that was kind of my question. I mean, I'm seeing this ongoing
Yeah,
deficit for capital outlay.
they've given us
It's huge,
13,000 in the past, is that right, Casey?
Yeah.
get to that's no thing.
Grossly
Under- and they-
underfunded for what
They
they
had
get.
all that, I took all that research. And I know they knew it, but I put it on their desk and said, we need help. So I'm hoping, in fact, I need to go back over there and tell them the armored cars outside, I have my satchel. So we're working on it
Just
as best we can, but it's a hole here, but it is where you go if you need an event right now, and we need to, like I say, work together. The airport has been very successful with the city and the county working together, and I don't see any reason why the fairgrounds can't be the same.
The airport expenditures will be pretty much, the city's contribution to that within a year or two will drop together.
Yes. So, but hey, but that's my little fairground. You can tell I was on the fair board, so.
It was a good campaign speech.
Okay, you like it? You wanna go with me and you can carry a satchel when we go in there?
So the fairgrounds also started a revenue stream this year with the new event that they have with the auction, right?
Correct. We did a benefit auction right after the holidays, and we're very successful in bringing in some additional sponsorship dollars. So that was a big deal, and it's gonna turn into an annual event for us. It was very well received by the community, and Susie and Ryan and Seth and everybody was gracious enough to come and support us.
Well, Susie did more work than any of us though.
People People in Crook County and Prineville are very generous, and I mean, it's unbelievable the generosity that we have in this community, and I think that's because we are rural, and that is really important for me to keep. Because they just, you go to them and they say, what do you need? There you get it.
In addition to that, we continue to, in discussion with our state legislators, there's probably not a fairgrounds in the state that, you know, is holding its own, with the exception of the large ones. During the COVID and the wildfires, it was a huge eye opener for the legislature because the state fairgrounds were the ones that they called on, and there was deficits and, you know, equipment and capital and buildings that were falling apart. They see it, now they're trying to figure out how to fund it. So we continue to chip away at the legislature for the resiliency of all of that. The forest fires a few years ago was another one. We housed animals and people here from the valley. So they had to come this far to do that. So we're committed to making it happen.
So is this a good time to talk about how we fund people that want to use the venues, and how, is this the time to kind of have that conversation, or is that?
If you wanna bring up, I mean, we do have a lot more presentations to do today, but
That's fine.
maybe it's
I just know it's a conversation we need to have, because
it is.
there,
it
a
feels
lot
like-
of those
yeah.
beds in the beds are through events that Casey puts on, that we as a county provide funding for them to be there, the hospice auction, Pee Wee rodeo, the high school rodeo, and we need to continue to do that to keep the fairgrounds whole. But I think we just need to figure out how we do that, and it sounds like through our fund of compassion, what are we gonna call it?
Community, I think it's called community benefit.
Community
Community
benefit,
support.
community support
We
fund.
can call it whatever.
I think Casey, because I know that that's something Casey's really concerned about it.
Yeah.
So, that, through that community, I think we may go back to the system of coming, you know, go to the fair board, talk to them, and then go to the county commission, board of commissioners to talk to them.
I think the fair board would be complete support of that.
Yeah.
They got top flat footed a couple of times.
And the thing about, like, you look at high school rodeo or Pee Wee rodeo and go, well, they should pay, but the bottom line is what they bring in, and also Burns is waiting for
They're
them.
just waiting.
So we've lost kind of PI right now for a while to Madras, which is a huge economic hit to this community. That was just last weekend. And so do we want to give more of that away, because basically we're keeping all our small businesses going by supporting those things. So the dollars that we're giving are coming back, you know, at least,
Tenfold.
yes,
Yeah.
back. So it is an important thing, and we do need to, like I said, we need that armored truck and those big satchels.
So, but I mean, and I think we can, as a government, figure out how to do that. I just know that was something Casey was really concerned about, so I wanted to speak to him.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You're doing a good job, Casey.
Check it out. Thank you, Casey.
All right, Kelly, you're up.
Good morning. Good morning. Kelly Topfeld, Airport Manager. So I've been the airport manager for quite a few years, probably 11, 12 years now. But this is my first time with the county budget. So
Kelly has to deal with two budgets, well, kind of, not anymore, but.
yeah, a little transition. So it's been a little interesting. And I want to thank Christina and Jamie. They've been so easy to work with and make the transition. It was great. So thanks.
Likewise, Kelly's been great with all of the challenges that have erupted over trying to manage the transition. So with that, that kind of takes us into the numbers, which are gonna look dramatically different across the last few years, and that is because the county is taking over the operations and the funding side of the airport, except for Kelly and his personnel costs. And then the county will be paying the city to cover Kelly's personnel costs with an agreement that kind of ramps up over the next 5 years to get his whole personnel costs covered. So some of the major things you'll see is intergovernmental. Those are grants that cover various projects at the airport. This year, in fiscal year 25, there is a large runway project that is being funded by the FAA, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, we have additional grants that are helping cover the county's portion
Match.
of that. So we have a very small portion of the match for this $5.6 million crosswind runway that is going to be built. It also helps fund some of the T hangars that are gonna be built out at the airport, which will provide an additional revenue stream. The goal of the business plan that Kelly will kind of talk about later is to make sure that the airport is self-funding and bringing in enough revenue to cover its costs. So materials and services will include basic contracts that are needed to run the airport, as well as the contract for Kelly's salary, and then capital outlay is those grant funded projects. We also have the Helibase bond that is paid out of this fund, and so you'll see the principal and interest payments, as well as a note payable, and that note payable is for the county repurchasing or purchasing the Les Schwab hangars, which we have rent that covers the entire payment for those that we receive. Let's see, and then we have a pretty healthy contingency that ends the year.
All right, well, thank you. You said it all.
Well, yeah.
I guess I'm done.
We didn't really plan on who's gonna do what, so I'm happy to cover.
No,
what you want.
I got it. I was decent. Well, and I just want to talk about a couple of things real quick. So we have the business plan, complete the business plan. So, working with Amy Parks, over the last year, more than a year, we've been working on a business plan. I would say it's 95% complete. There's just some documents we want to finish up, to tidy it up. Most of it is, like I say, is done, so it's in the implementation process. And it's all based upon a 5-year plan to be self-sustaining. So the airport, like a lot of departments, we kind of tread water for a long time. We've seen a lot of growth and a lot of new people and new land leases. But of course, the projects to keep things going cost more and more. So with the business plan, we have new ground lease documents and policy, which is kind of clean things up out there. The intent is to capture additional ground rent from existing tenants and to capture increased ground rent from new tenants. So we have some new buildings going on up there. And so as these new leases come on board, we'll be able to capture more revenue and stay at market rates rather than previously we were just behind the curve constantly. So and continue to encourage private and business development. That's a big piece of the business plan. We constantly have business interest. We have some people just currently that are interested in building 100 by 150 foot hangar for some manufacturing. Of course, you know, I hear that a lot, but we'll see what happens. But this one seems a pretty positive conversation here lately to maybe get something going, which includes jobs and such with that. So anyway, really focusing on trying to support that. And I wanted to mention the capital improvements for this year, and Christine had already mentioned. So revenue generating aircraft storage hangars. So the FAA, we have some funding available for some projects outside of their typical allocation. You know, typically it's runway pavement type money that's available. This time, this money is actually available for revenue generating, such as the hangars. So we're going down that road. It's quite a bit of money, but it's still a limited amount of funds for most of the projects. So these hangars have been pretty expensive. So we're putting them out to bid a second time here to see if we can get them a little closer to what the funding's available. So that project within the next, hopefully within the next 12 months. And then the big project this year, well over $4 million FAA funded runway reconstruction project. So we have a secondary runway that was, built in the sixties with no engineering. It's been kind of patched and kept together for years and years, and we've been able to, get FAA funding for that crossing runway, and it'll be completely reconstructed. It won't be longer, but it will be wider, new lights, and it'll take us years and years and years in the future. So anyway, this is kind of a, just a short recap of what we have going on at the airport.
Questions?
Is that an additional runway or is that redoing an existing runway?
It's an existing runway, so we have actually two runways. We have the main runway, which you see as you go down the road,
Yeah.
where you see most of the action, and then, I don't know if you've seen all the water line improvements. So just past the water line improvements, if you look out there, there's a secondary runway and actually cross out there.
But it needs to be upgraded.
Yeah, it's rough, it's rough. And typically, FAA doesn't usually fund on a small airport a crosswind runway. But when we did the master plan 6-7 years ago, we did a lot of promotion to keep it, and we're able to get it funded. Of course, then it's taken, 5 years to get on the list to get the project funded and moving. So hopefully, we'll start this fall and finish next spring.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Hello, Jackie Davis from the Crook County Landfill.
So here's the landfill fund, primarily, the big revenue source is those solid and septic waste fees, as you probably would expect. On the personnel side, there is a decrease due to eliminating a vacant position out of the budget. There's been a little bit of reorganization, 2 positions that Jackie can touch on, but that is the cause for the decrease. And it has historically been a vacant position. It's just one we've had authorization for and haven't fully needed. Within the capital outlay, there are budgeted vehicle replacements and site improvements. The rest for materials and services, I'll let Jackie touch on more of hers. I did want to point out that reserve for future expenditure, we do have a large dollar amount there. It is a legal requirement, primarily for post-closure costs. It's inflation adjusted. If you look in the fiscal policy, you can see all the details of what's there, but we want to make sure that we have enough money in reserve both to operate as well as those post-closure requirements.
Okay. So these top 3 items are pretty much wrapped into one project, but we have the update to the solid waste management plan, update of our 20-year financial model, and the establishment of a solid waste advisory committee. This year, we set out an RFP to update our solid waste management plan, which is essentially our master plan for the next 10 years, as to how we will manage the growth and waste volumes as we move forward. So with this master plan, we will get projections of future populations and what that will look like to the volume of waste that we receive. With those numbers, we'll be able to project out the life of the cells that we currently have and then budget going forward as to when we need to implement new cells and get those built in time for those to be utilized. They will also take a look at potential updated needs for replacing equipment, infrastructure, facilities as we implement new services going forward. It will also take a look at waste recovery programs and efforts to make sure that we are in compliance with DEQ's requirement to meet our waste recovery goal for the year. But ultimately, this project will project out our rate schedule for at least the next 10 to 20 years. It will set tipping scale fees so that we can sustain going forward as we're a self-sustained facility. So it will ensure that we have enough funds and money coming in to support the needs going further. The last piece of that is the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. The county had one in place prior to COVID and then it diminished, so we're working with the city to get a joint committee together. We have the same similar needs and concerns for solid waste and waste recovery, so both sides feel it's a good venture to do a joint effort. And this committee will play a vital role in our solid waste management plan, providing public input. As JRMA, that's the company that's doing this program for us, comes in with ideas and costs, it will provide feedback to them through this committee. We are reviewing the franchise agreement with Republic Services, just working with them on some service improvement programs, and we are also working with their financial reports that they've submitted, taking a look at those as they propose rate increases for the next year. Moving forward into 2025, we will see the implementation of at least one major state program, possibly two. This one will be the RMA, the Recycling Modernization Act. This is Senate Bill 582 that was passed in 2021. It will standardize recycling across the state of Oregon. So there will be a list of required items that you have to recycle if you're in an area of a population over 10,000. So if it's recyclable in Portland, it has to be recyclable in Prineville, in Burns. So it's going to standardize what's being recycled. You can expand beyond that program and offer other services, but this will be a list of standardized items. The other possible program is the mattress recycling program. It has been approved as a program, but they're still working on the rules and regulations as to how that will work. They've come back to DEQ twice now and it's been denied. So the next proposal is June of 24. So we might see that come available also. So with those two programs, the Recycling Act will need to be implemented by July of 2025, not the whole program, but we need to start. So with that, we'll be seeing some additional materials and services costs. We'll have to do additional drop boxes, possibly purchase a forklift, an additional forklift. Might even need to add a full-time employee as a recycle attendant for this program as a contamination rate. And if you saw the list of what's accepted, we're gonna get a lot of contamination. So we more than likely need somebody standing there telling the public what they can and cannot recycle. But those costs are kind of up in the air. So we're just trying to be conservative through this next year so we can look forward to having some money available for those. With the RMA, there is the opportunity to get reimbursed for some of those costs to implement these programs. But you pay up front and then you get reimbursed and they're still not clear on how much you'll get or what you'll get. We have explored additional revenue options. We've talked in the past about looking at getting Jefferson County's waste back. They began trucking to Wasco several years ago. This is a renewal year for Wasco, but their renewal rate came back at $26 a ton, which is not something we can touch. Ours right now is $60 a ton, so it doesn't look feasible for us to even attempt that. But within the last month, I have been approached by Deschutes County. They're citing their new landfill and they are looking to extend the life of their landfill by at least a year, if not longer. So they have brought to the table the option to take Negus's transfer station solid waste.
I didn't hear what you said.
So Deschutes County is wanting to expand the life of their landfill for what they have while they get the new landfill in place. So they came to us asking if we'd be interested in taking Negus's solid waste from their transfer station.
It's the red.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep, sorry. and they would guarantee a certain volume. There are several things that go along with this. We're in the very preliminary stages. I do have Jerry Friesen, who is the engineer on our solid waste management plan. He put together all kinds of options, what this would do for revenue, operational costs, things we need. I have a meeting with him this afternoon, but we are exploring that for additional revenue. Our purchase for next year is a water truck. Our current water truck is a 1979 Mack water truck, so we got pre-approval from the commissioners to go ahead and order a 2025 International with an Onco tank. We had budgeted 250,000. We came in at 246, so we're under budget on that. It will take a year to get that, so funds will be dispersed in 25 when it's budgeted for. And then the last item, strive to conserve on-site natural resources for future beneficial landfill use. This is basically our needs for daily cover. We have some on-site borrow pits, so we are utilizing those. We recover any materials that other customers bring in that we can use, contaminated soil, fill dirt brought in from other companies. We try and reclaim that and use that for cover. We also do a spray fiber product on our municipal solid waste cell, which is our kitchen household garbage cell, to supplement that, but we will continue to do that. So hopefully that will last us for the long future, so we don't have to purchase any materials in the near future. That's all I have.
Any questions?
Great question. And it may vary wildly based upon your success getting the revenue stuff, but what's the anticipated remaining lifespan of the landfill, and what is in relation to that, the total resources since you're building them up, that what would cost to close that landfill when you reach that point?
So as of now, we have 12 MSW cells designed and approved by the state. The suggested life of the landfill is 100 years, so we have plenty of.
But we're building up money to close the landfill, or just to close out the.
So-
Regulation, right?
So it's a regulation. If somebody,
If we got a violation, or we were forced to close, or the county could no longer operate,
right,
there's various things. We have to prove that we have the funds to close it, which is cover it to their standards. And then for the next 30 years, we have to provide monitoring services and testing for groundwater leachate, everything for 30 years after the closure.
So
So,
you've got 100-year anticipated lifespan.
yes,
so it's just money we have to hold and it can't touch. It's 4.2 or 3 million movement. So it's a pretty big portion of that set aside.
I see that the fund balance is very healthy and growing. And so is there a goal? Or is there a limitation to that? I mean,
So, I mean, and Jackie, you could jump in too, but part of that 20-year plan refresh is just to make sure that truly we can sustain costs, because DEQ requirements, some of those things coming down the line are quite costly compared to just normal operations. And so on paper, it is growing. Correct me if I'm wrong, that 20-year plan, the work they are doing will project what we actually need. So we will be aligning the fee schedule with the recommendation from that contracted study.
yeah, there's under the environmental monitoring plan and Division 39 or 239, the state changed the emissions on methane monitoring. So we are testing quarterly. Should the landfill fail to test, then we will be required to implement a flare system, which is a multi-million-dollar project. So far, we've been able to sustain, but if at any given moment we do pass or fail, then we have a year to design and then begin the implementation process. So the more money we have available, the better.
And it's painfully stupid.
Yes,
we may not even have enough methane to run the flame the entire time, so you actually have to burn
we have to supplement.
propane to continue to burn the methane that they're trying to fix. And so, yeah, it's just another example of our wonderful state overregulation. And so really, I think you would actually be a net negative for environmental carbon footprint, right? If you're burning propane to then burn the methane. So, yeah, it's just, we're kind of stuck in la la land.
But that requirement may be more of a when than an if, so
Yeah,
the forecast
Yeah.
reflects that,
yeah, it's definitely a win.
But it's somewhat like a $2 million project. $3 million?
Oh,
More?
yeah,
10? Was it?
we got it at 3, but so Deschutes just, they already have a system in place, but they had an open flare, they had to go to an enclosed flare. The flare alone for them last year was $750,000 just for the flares, so we have to begin from scratch, so it's, we don't really have a great cost estimate for that. Wasco went ahead and just put one in, and theirs was about $3 million, so that's kind of what I was working with, but.
any others?
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Everybody's doing, we did have a scheduled break, we haven't finished all the presentations before that break, but do anybody need a break? Or we-
I'll make it quick.
Sorry, I didn't mention that before, I thought the baby's on the screen here.
Morning, Thomas Laird, Crook County Weed Control.
So here is the weed control fund. The primary revenue source is revenue collected for spraying charges. And personnel dollars have changed dramatically, primarily because we did have a weed master for a very long time who has retired out in fiscal 24. There was about 4 months of overlap, and so Thomas will be the sole and main only person moving forward, as we've had for years. And then materials and services are really just the cost of administering the program, the cost for spray, and pieces like that, and then contingency.
So, I mean, the biggest challenge of anything that's enterprise funded or likewise is, recovering full cost to maintain operations. I feel like that's kind of beating a dead horse though, so, but a couple, minor things, that I'd like to do. We talked about this, with finance, I was delaying, purchase of certain equipment. So pushing back a new ATV and new pickup about a year, just to kind of give me a little bit of wiggle room in the program. The other thing too is, update equipment costs, the hourly costs. So it's astoundingly low and it needs to kind of get updated to what it actually costs to use my ATVs, spray rigs, whatnot. So those are two things I think that will help kind of give it a little more wiggle room. You know, the other thing that's kind of new for the program is working with finance, and they've kind of helped me get aligned a little bit on going forward, right? So that's been helpful. I think the other thing that needs to be on there, and I didn't put on there, is working with the new county manager. That's another thing too. That's, you know, every program's different, and so I'd really like to be on the same page. And maybe with the new manager, that might help me work on new agreements, new agency contracts, that kind of thing. So that's something I wanted to add on there. The other thing is public education, outreach. You know, I don't have a strong Facebook or Twitter presence or any of that, which me personally, I don't want anything to do with, but I think for the county, it's just the new age, it's the way it is now. I mean, we have a great website, so why not just work in tandem with that and piggyback off that and kind of build that program? I get a lot of phone calls and people say, hey, I checked out your website and it said, call. So, and that's it, you know?
So that's one thing I'd like to kind of move on, probably this winter when I have time. And then, draft a strategic plan. I'd like to get a, kind of like a 5-year plan, an outline. Most of my agreements with most of my partners are 5 years, so it kind of fits. So that's something I'd like to work towards. And we didn't do an update page, did we? For this?
These were
This is
the
it, okay. The only other updates I have is county road shoulders are finished. So finished those in April. I've now transitioned to Bureau Rec and BPA work. So working on lines and reservoirs within the county. Title III work will be up Juniper Canyon. This is the last year. And then we'll start Mackay Creek. And I'm working from about Dry Creek, Santukis, all the way up to the forest boundary. So, the other grant, EDRR, hasn't started yet. That will start towards the middle of June. Other than that, that's kind of what I got going on. Any questions?
I want to ask you, so you said you wanted to work with the new county manager. Did you do much work with Andy or no? You've just been kind of left alone.
Been kind of in the back cave, yeah.
I know that I haven't got up to see you, so I know I'm a bad one, but okay. I just was curious when you said that. Okay, thank you.
So you mentioned your run rates on your equipment is low.
Yeah.
To what market should be. And I see that we do a lot of work with outside, counties as well as like Bonneville Power.
Correct.
So in order to adjust your rates, is that a contract negotiation that's only available to do every 5 years? Are we contractually bound to the pricing that you've provided them?
Typically, no. All of my contracts, with the exception of Bonneville, actually, they're all very, very flexible.
Okay.
Material costs, especially with the position that I'm in, it can vary wildly year to year, right? So they're pretty flexible on that. But I know like for the county rate, for the work I'm doing for the road department, I got my F-350 at $15 an hour. And I burned through more fuel in an hour. You know what I mean? My ATVs I have is $15 an hour. That's still pretty low when you look at what everybody else is charging.
Is that something the commissioners have to agree on as a new rate for weed control?
It's not on the county schedule. I think it's just those like internal.
It's something that Thomas needs to work out as he does the contracts.
So we are working, that was something that we started last year, is cost accounting for stuff, so we can get a good idea of what those
So that you know.
should be. So he has better numbers to go back and say, this is what's going to cost me.
Right.
Right, taking the time to get that body.
So it's a work in progress.
It is, same with like my full burden rate, that's still a work in progress. But again, back to your point, my contracts, typically, as long as the work is being done and done on time, they've given me that flexibility, which has been great because of these things that happen. They don't really care as long as the work is done.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, it pencils out.
Could you have two different rates? Could you have a county rate and maybe you already do a county rate and like a contract rate?
Typically, in the past, that's what I've done. And that's another thing that Jamie and I have talked about, that is when I used to do work in-house, I guess is what you'd call it.
Yeah.
I would not charge an overhead. Right.
Yeah.
But we haven't established that, and that's something we're working on.
I think if you were looking at to not gouge the road department, but
Right, well, or like landfill
Yeah.
or fairgrounds,
any
exactly.
of those guys, just whatever the cost is.
And that's what it should be in my
Make a few
opinion.
bucks on the other one.
Yeah,
Are you paying rent at the road department for your space, or do they provide that at no cost?
we got a whole agreement. We kind of looked over it. Yeah, there's a whole, I honestly don't know the entire, there's some weird little minute things in there.
Yeah.
Both of those departments have new leadership, so it's a great opportunity to have these conversations.
Yeah, when I have a question, typically, I just go to Brad and say, hey, what do you think? And he goes, oh, yeah, or, oh, no.
Sounds like you're getting better. It's just a work in progress. Good job.
Yeah, and this program, the work is exactly the same
Sure.
from Jefferson County. But, you know, in terms of the scope of the job, but it's all those little minor things. And then funding the program, you know, over there, they were willing, the taxpayers were willing to fund that program for $60,000 pill money. And that's not a thing here. So, you know, you have a little different obligations here. So that's the only major roadblock I've had. But yeah, it's growing, progress.
Thank you.
Good, thanks. Hey, anyone need a very quick break?
Yeah, if you wanna. Yes?
I'm good.
How much longer do you think this is?
So we have, we have about like 3 or 4 more things to tell you about, and then we were thinking of period of public comment. We don't have any public here that I can see, and I don't know if we have many on the call, but we could open a period of public comment and then do a break. Or we can reorder that, however it makes sense.
Let's just do the way you say.
Okay, so we just got a few more quick.
Push through it.
Oh, yeah, that's what I say.
Okay,
Okay.
Do we have a hard stop at 12:45 again today, or?
so I think we can go fully till noon today. And if we need to, I can go check with them. It does not appear, thank you, sir. It does not appear that anybody else.
That might be good, because if we can get clear through it, we can skip Thursday, is that correct?
That is correct, if we can finish business today, so.
I didn't know that.
Like, that's a gift, isn't it?
Power play.
Balance time.
Like farmer, that's just work.
Okay, all right, capital projects.
So our next fund is our capital projects fund. These are for large construction projects in the county. Most specifically is the Justice Center. So you'll see it, the beginning of the Justice Center in 2022. The vast majority of construction in 23 to 24. And then we have a little bit of construction finishing up in 2025. And then we have the starting of the courthouse, engineering and architecture work that's being done. Materials and services is just the internal service fees that support the community, or the capital projects. You'll notice this very large transfer of $8.5 million that's estimated in 2024. We will be needing to do a supplemental budget for that, and that is just due to cash flow and timing of cash flow in the Justice Center. As you'll see, we had anticipated receiving some of that $16 million from the state in fiscal year 24. I don't believe that's going to happen before the end of the year. So we will be appropriating our capital reserves to cover that timing difference, and then anticipate receiving those state funds in 2025. There is a Scrivener's error, which we'll talk about correcting. This 7.5 million should be 8.5 million to anticipate returning the entire 8.5 million that was used for cash flow from capital reserves to capital reserves once we receive that 16 million.
Okay, next slide.
So some of the highlights is the substantial completion of the Justice Center by the end of June, which is this fiscal year, with a few things to tidy up at the beginning of fiscal year 25. The activity on the Juniper Canyon access feasibility and exploration work was moved into the Community Development Fund because it is being part of that TSP, which Community Development is also managing. The construction project manager position was eliminated, and we will use it in the future if we need it. But that's why you'll see the change in materials and services. We did eliminate that position. It was also due to a vacancy. And then finally, we'll be moving into that architectural and engineering and design phase of the courthouse renovation for this fiscal year. Any questions? You haven't seen the Justice Center, drive by and look at it, it's really pretty.
Or take a tour, Brian.
Take a tour with Brian, it's pretty amazing.
It really is, looks nice.
Shiny.
I'm glad to see that blue's gone. All of it was enough. It's going, it's just taking a while to get the stone.
Alright, next fund is our capital asset reserve fund, and we don't have anything appropriated for this fund other than the anticipated $8.5 million transfer out, which will need that supplemental budget. We do receive quite a bit of interest for this fund. And then the $23 intergovernmental transfer in is for a loan payment for the museum building. And then you'll see the same Scrivener's error here was going to be corrected to $8.5 million to return those funds from the Justice Center once those dollars come in. And then you'll see the $120 transfer that goes out into that risk management fund. And then the rest of it is in contingency because we don't plan on spending it. Questions on that? All right. This last fund is our debt service fund, so our general obligation bonds have to be put in a fund of their own for debt service. This one also has a levy to make those payments. We're anticipating a levy of $619,000 with a collection rate of about 94%. So that's why our tax revenue here doesn't match the 619,000 is because we are anticipating that 94%. And then you'll see our bond payments. And then a little bit of interest is received on any difference between what we actually collect and what is used to make bond payments. Those funds do stay in this fund, and any balance is included in the calculation in the next year for the levy for bond payments. So we're attempting to levy as close to exactly what we need as possible.
Yeah.
Any questions?
So, 6% effective delinquency, right, I guess, or, right, of that. So, I presume we have active collections on that. And as that money comes back in, how does that impact the budget?
Yeah, so it gets put in this fund and it's rolling forward with that beginning fund balance. It will be receipted as taxes. And then it gets taken into account in the next year when we look at the levy and say, okay, we have this much that we've actually received. The outstanding amount is kind of we hope to collect it. But it's hard to determine when we're gonna collect it.
Are the cost of collections almost analogous to what you end up receiving in collection?
Basically, however, we don't actually pursue tax collections, so we don't really have a ton of costs other than my tax collector's time in doing the statements.
So you just wait until it's delinquent enough and then you seize the property?
So this levy is part of the overall property tax, so it kind of gets conglomerated into the rest of that property tax. So if you can't just pay the levy and not the rest of your property tax. So as that property has a 6-year period of time when they don't collect, or when the property tax, if it isn't collected in that 6-year period of time, then it would go into foreclosure and then would come back to the county and the county would sell it for the tax receipts.
Or somebody steps up and.
Correct. Or somebody, or whatever happens in that process, there's a lot of different things that can happen in that process.
And either way, those proceeds come back here.
Correct, yeah, they're always, they're always allocated, it is very tiny, and they're always allocated back to the original type of tax that it would have been.
So as part of the work that we, like, through budget process, so we have, you will be saying, part of your motion will be that tax rate, all of that information, there's forms that we give to our assessor's office. Anybody else in the county who is a taxing district also gives those forms to the assessor's office. They're the ones who compile the whole thing and unfortunately say of every dollar collected, this is how it gets parsed out. So our levy, our county property taxes, the city's taxes, all of them become part of the assessor's official record of here's the taxes of the county.
Okay.
So it's, to answer your question about the prior year taxes, of that 590,000 that we're hoping to collect as revenue this year, about 11,000 of it we think will be from prior year taxes. So about 579,000 we think will be new current year property tax revenue. So we have detailed accounting, in the background.
And 6% is that a pretty stable number, or does that go with the economy?
So that's
That's an average. So, the exact page, it's in your appendix. There is actually some history. I'm gonna say it's like 204, 203-ish, somewhere in there. We actually do have a table that shows the property tax collection. It's actually, I think, page 204. Okay, well, there we are. I know this document.
Too many times.
That's kind of the concern reading.
She's been doing it lately, she can find the exact number on things.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's
I'm not sure which one.
hopefully not too frightening, but that second table where we say property tax collections, you can see those are the actuals. So fiscal 23, 95.7%, 94.7, 94, 93. So we're actually getting better, which is nice. But then when you add the prior year, that's the columns to the right of that, you can see that actual property tax collection ends up growing to closer to 98%. So, and that could be in part due to when people pay the full amount up front and they get a 3% discount. Some of that impacts the collection rate too, minimally, but mostly it's due to people delaying payment rather than getting the discount. But those are factors.
And it's all tracked on an account by account basis in our software.
Good, thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions? All right. So, as Christina mentioned, we do have that one typo. It's a little typo, but it's also $1 million typo. So take that for what it's worth. So here's what we are just proposing for you to consider in your deliberations. One change to what we have proposed is increasing that transfer revenue for the capital asset reserve fund by $1 million. Impact requirements means the transfer appropriation in that capital projects grows by $1 million. We would take it out of the capital projects fund contingency. And then on the capital asset reserve fund, it would grow the contingency by that same amount. This is what it looks like overall for the budget. So it would increase the overall county revenue from the 139 million to 140 million, 502. And then on the expenditure requirement side, you can see it just grows the transfer appropriation contingency shows a 0 because it's 1 million out of one fund, 1 million into another fund. So a net of 0 change to contingency. And again, balancing this total requirements back to 140,502,000. This is what it looks like for capital projects fund. If you choose to accept that. And then this is what it would look like for the capital asset reserve fund. So I think that's the only change that we might ask you to consider above and beyond your printed document. I ran through this really quick. If you want to look at them again, I can go back to any of those. It's pretty straightforward. Okay.
Public comment. Is there anyone online? Do we know?
So let me open up the chat to see if anybody's commenting.
There's a few people.
There are a few people online. It does not appear that anybody is raising their hand or asking to make public comments. I don't see anybody here.
Okay, so that was our period for public comments. Do we need a break for a minute before we have any continue our discussion?
Take a quick one.
Okay.
I was gonna be the one to call.
Okay, so come back in 5 minutes.
Yep.
Approximately 11:30, we will start up again.
That's 6.
Wow.
So generous.
We'll just switch over.
Yeah.
tomorrow, and conference is at 8:30.
And,
I think we bring up this conversation.
well, I already.
Right, and I got a whole fairgrounds site in all.
Every year,
Yeah, well, we did,
All right, our break time is over.
Well, I did.
So we did check on. We did check on room use. We do have a lot of stuff at noon. So I would say let's do what we can, see how conversation and deliberation goes. And decide by the end of that time if we
okay,
continue
so
on
if we
Thursday.
do, get down to the motion, is the fill-in round amount is the 140?
Yes, you discuss if that's something you're all open to, but
Right, I
yes,
mean,
yes. If you need that exact dollar amount, I can write it
I
in.
like we have Stephen brought his calculator.
There you go.
I do like that.
Where is it? It's starting putting in numbers, so
Okay.
we're good. We have to wait for Stephen. I don't know where he is. Oh,
Are there any other questions about any of the presentations that we can help answer for you?
I don't think so, you guys?
you guys have both done extremely good job.
Yeah, you know. I have
Okay.
a few
Oh, that's
questions, and yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a few questions, and maybe it's just kind of discussion and a little information in there.
Excellent. We are here to answer whatever you need.
Okay,
Are we back on?
okay, and we're back.
Is the recording going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a general question. On the general fund, non-departmental. There's a new dollar amount for discretionary funds for the Board of Commissioners to use for community support in the amount of $100,000.
That kind of came from me. So basically, we have people come in. And so the example would be Kids Club. We've never funded it. They come in, they need $5,000, or Hearts of Oregon came in, and if we gave $5,000, they got a matching grant. So I wanted something so that we could sit there and you go, okay, I just gave 10 away, now I've only got 90 left. And it gives you the ability to say no, and it gives you the ability to say yes. And probably we will be looking at that $23,000 from the fairgrounds that we're giving away to hospice like we thought. That will probably be going out of that. And so that was kind of a request that I had to give us just a budgetary, because before it was just a yes, and you'd have to go to Christina, do we have the money? This way, you've got that and you're kind of keeping a running tab, and I assume in my head.
Are there any link buckets in the parameters of you?
Well, that would be something I guess we could come up with, but that was the basis of why I wanted to do that. Down in the county where I came from, they gave each commissioner a discretionary fund. And they were able to spend that during the fiscal year, and they spent it on what their passion was. You know, Brian would spend on this, I would spend. We don't do that here, but this enables us to support things in the community. So yes, we could come up with parameters, or you could leave it at our discretion that the three of us all need to vote on it together.
The three commissioners have to
Yes.
agree that it's an acceptable expenditure.
Check that, and it's for community benefit. Like, one of the things that I would tag immediately would be, we need to make a motion and go ahead and do the fair. And right now, it sits at about 23,000, whatever, so let's say 24. That would be your high school rodeo, your pee-wee rodeo, and those things.
And most of these people come in and do a presentation.
Yes.
And ask for it.
Yeah, it isn't just a handing out, like Hearts of Oregon did a wonderful presentation. And by us giving her 5,000, I can't remember, but she got X amount of money back, which enabled her to have 4 groups of teens coming out into Crook County working this summer. It was a very good, and it benefits the community, it's good for the kids, so yes, there is, it's not just like, hey, can I have it? Kids Club came in and did a very nice presentation, Ashley Thrasher. We had never funded her before, but we did.
But she had a really good point. So not a lot, but there's multiple people in the county that have their kids there in the afternoons. And so that's really childcare for the county. For the price that we paid, it was very good. So I mean, they're well thought out. It's not just kind of.
It sounds like you've been doing this ad hoc already before.
Yeah.
Exactly, I'm trying to have a thing, and it does also give you the ability, in our company, we had a certain percentage that we did, and we went to the fair, or we did Little League, or whatever. That was the way we did our charitable giving, basically. And basically, I'm just trying to bring that forward to the county, and it does give you the ability to say no, because you say, I'm sorry, you know, we budgeted, we're at the end of our budget, and, you know, next year you need to come sooner, or whatever. It gives you that kind of that yes and that no ability. So,
So I agree with the funding for it, I
Okay.
agree with the concept, as long as we have the right level of accountability next year to approve another $100,000 to say, we spent 80 of the 100 last year, and this is what we spent.
No.
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, as long as that
And agreed,
transparency
it would be,
exists.
in this setting, it would be the 3 commissioners would be deciding, and I would assume it would be unanimous decision on the presentations that we received. So like I say, I'm just trying to kind of put it in a better,
I think
like you
what
said,
Scott's-
we're doing it.
Instead of ad hoc, you have a formalized.
Yes, and then I don't have to say to Christina, do we have the money?
I think what Scott's saying is at the end of, at next year's budget process, let's make sure we have a list of that and a page in here that shows
Yes.
all the things that we
Yes.
did and
And
how
you're
much we
exactly
spent.
right. And if we have-
that's what you're talking
If we
about.
have 80, I don't plan to go to 120. That's just the sum that we came up with, but you're exactly right. We should have accountability for all of that that should be coming out. And sorry, girls, another time.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's not coming from here or coming from there or.
Right, from multiple different sources.
That's the.
I just think it makes it more business-like.
I think that provides better transparency to the program overall.
In fact, I thank you for picking that up. Thank you. I like that.
I did read it.
Well, hey, I think that's great. You read my one thing, so I'm very impressed.
Took me 3 nights to read the whole thing.
I'm impressed. It's like 100 pages a night.
Well, it's, you know,
It's a lot of.
obviously you get into the balance sheets, you gotta take a little while longer. So, I appreciated the general commentary immensely. And that was a huge, step up in, my learning curve, I'm sure these guys as well. So you guys did a great job.
Thank you. We can't take all the credit. The departments did help write all of their.
It was very well put together. Two general comments that I'll make. It's concerning that our pay rate structure in Crook County is below Jefferson County. I understand Deschutes County due to the cost of living differences that exist there. But Jefferson County, in contrast,
So part of that we are addressing with the compensation study that's currently in progress. It's actually on the agenda tomorrow to be looked at, given the final approval.
okay,
And so part of that compensation study looks at our competitors and our comparables. So we look at competitors like Deschutes County and Jefferson County, but we also look at comparable counties of the comparable size. And I want to say before that study, our compensation was like the 30th percentile. And our attempt is to bring it up more to the 40th and 50th percentile. And then create more equity across positions within the organization, because that had gotten out of whack as well.
Right, not every single pay is below Jefferson. There are certain departments or certain positions that have gotten out of sync with where they need to be, which was also a component of the compensation study to make sure that positions were in the right spot relative to other positions in the county.
Do you anticipate, obviously it's way too premature for that, I mean, my brain goes to Okay, so next year when we see the budget and we do equity, reassignment of position pay, you know, how big, I mean, is this $1 million difference? Is this $10 million?
Yeah, so right now with the adjustments that are being suggested, it's around $600,000.
Total across everything in law enforcement and everything?
That includes everything, however, we have some really big unknowns right now, we can't put in that, which are the sergeant's bargaining unit, and then the sheriff's office deputies bargaining unit, as well as the road department bargaining unit, that those are not far enough in the process for us to be able to say, these are the increases we're gonna have across those.
So when you say 600, are you excluding those departments in your calculation?
That excludes the unions in that calculation.
So what we did do for. So what we did do for budgeting purposes, it's not hidden, but you may not know in particular. The forecasting section shows baseline assumptions that were established for all of the budget. So those same baseline assumptions were used to form like the personnel budget. So we anticipate a cost of living increase equal to inflation. Our assumption, what we actually budgeted for non-represented groups, was closer to 5%, plus we had growth for those step increases. So what we did in essence with this budget was we built ourselves a cushion for compensation updates from the compensation study, realizing we don't have the granular, we don't know exactly how it affects every position in every fund and every department, but we built the cushion above the inflation amount to absorb that in the current budget.
And numerically, was that cushion 600,000 or was it a greater?
It wasn't done that granularly, but we could figure out what it was.
Was it $1 million or 200,000? I just. Again, I think that, to Scott's point, I think that when I look at this compensation portion of this, you know, you're gonna have a lot of pressure.
Right.
I think that was the basis of his question.
Absolutely.
Well, I understand how hard hiring and retention is.
Yep.
It's impossible if you don't have competitive pay. And, you know, when you start talking to individuals about the amount of time they have to train, you're gonna train an individual that's gonna take a job in another market. And so that headwind is incredible. Unless
Well,
you-
and the major sucking, right, as soon as you train them up, then, they move, you know.
It's a problem at the sheriff's department, and it's a problem at the district attorney, is basically Cook County has trained to shoot his
Yeah, exactly.
district attorneys, or deputy, or whatever you wanna call them, but no, that is a problem. And retention, and that gets into your retention, which we need to work on. So,
And
yes,
so is it anticipated this study will be implemented the first of the year, 2025? Is it the January 1 implementation, rolling
It's
implementation?
something the commissioners are all in discussions on, I think tomorrow, right? Is it on your agenda
Yeah,
for
it's on the
tomorrow?
agenda tomorrow.
So for this budget, they built in some cushion,
Not
anticipating that.
Right, so we also, prior to the compensation study, we had done kind of an evaluation of county pay to see what had happened over the years. And compared the two different bargaining units plus unrepresented folks. And the bargaining units fared better, they've been getting more consistent increases, cost of living adjustments over time. The unrepresented group had been getting 1% or smaller percentages, and so they fell behind inflation by about 15 to 17%. I can't remember exactly the number. I can do the page number on the budget document, but I can't really say it. We had fallen behind with inflation. And so at that point in time, we estimated it would be about $2 million to bring the unrepresented up that 15 to 17%. So I'm sorry, I don't have exact numbers for you, but if that gives you a better sense, like we do have some.
Is if, you know, the cost of retraining, the cost of everything else to get up to pay equity with comps. That's kind of what, is it, we do with 500,000 or we do it with 5 million or, that was kind of where I was driving.
Well, the thing is, we're gonna do it. It's either gonna be paid through pain,
By losing and having.
by not having services or people or in ongoing issues.
And there's other things we're doing to help with that gap, the accruals, leave accruals and changing it the way it was changed this year to allow people to come in and bring some experience with them instead of starting at the very bottom of the rule.
Yeah.
You know, instead of starting with 2 weeks, if you have 10 years of experience, you get 5 years of experience here in your accrual. So we're doing some other things that aren't necessarily immediate monetary impacts. But they could be if that person takes their leave and leaves, of course, you have that. But we're looking at other options that help us kind of stretch our dollar. The way our health insurance is structured is something else we're looking at, because those costs are increasing dramatically. We have really great health insurance, and that's another reason why people want to come work for the county. So kind of trying to bundle all of that together, and it's kind of a teeter-totter
And the 401k.
of the 401k match, that increased this year,
very
not match, excuse me, it's 12%. No matter what employees are putting in 401k, the county gets 12%, and that helps us compete with.
It is really good for that.
And even with that generous plan, it was interesting that the switch to PERS for just a few employees costs another $100,000. Is that
So-
for accrual or still part of the PERS problem?
That's part of hers. So, the percentage that our police and fire get, there is a 6%, it could be employee paid, but the county pays that portion. And then the officer, the police and fire like rate is about 24%. So that means the county contribution for those employees is closer to 30% than 12%.
And that portion includes a chunk that doesn't benefit us, the first problem that you're mentioning.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Well, it is refreshing, actually, this county doesn't have near that issue that others do.
Yeah.
One, maybe a little bit of a sensitive, question, but with the change in the commission, with that, what were your assumptions regarding the compensation of commissioners?
So,
No, that's.
so we kept it basically the same as current year. With the knowledge that the compensation committee is the one that determines the recommendations for the commissioners in particular. So in fiscal year 24, we had a full-time judge that we budgeted for, 2 part-time commissioners. All of them fully benefited, all of them receiving a $6,000 stipend, which is $500 a month for the travel and all the things. So it's not, the 2 part-time weren't receiving exactly half once you put the whole compensation package together. So that entire lump sum for the 2 part-times and the 1 full-time are what is budgeted, with the idea that the compensation committee likely will find 3 full-time amounts within that potentially, or it becomes a point of budget adjustment in the next year. Since our process had to be completed before the compensation committee met, I'm not even sure they had their members selected before we had to go to print on, some of this stuff. So that was the direction we were given. That was how Andy had wanted us to set it up for budget purposes for this year while it's unknown.
So that would go July 1, clear to next June 30, is that? Right, the new budget year.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, what was your?
But that was the thing, is we're in the process of a compensation committee to look at.
And then
Just
make some
according-
recommendations, and then they go to the commissioners.
All you can do is make the assumption and.
Yeah.
right, so we didn't want to grossly inflate it, we didn't want, and I think what we've done is a conservative approach. And if it's dramatically too low or too high, we can always adjust it to what it should be. But that would be, again, in a public setting, the commissioners would be reviewing that budget adjustment.
And even though we voted on that back, I don't know when, Brian and I didn't change, even though I had someone running against me and it's a full-time job and I did not feel it was honest to have someone running against you that thinks that maybe they can work 3 days a week and come in and do this job 2 days a week. That isn't honest. It is not it's a full-time job. So that was my part in wanting to bring that forward. Brian and I did not change our payroll structure at all we're willing to wait to what the compensation committee says. And if the compensation committee, they can pick a date or whatever, Brian and I are willing to accept that. I just wanted honesty in the hours that we're putting in.
And then, and I thought the argument was the hiring a manager, the county manager would then decrease the hours of.
And I do believe that will happen, but I do believe that's in the future. I think we need to get everything going really well, and yes, I truly believe within 2 years, we will be at that point. But will we be that when we first get that? No, I think it needs a little work and a little tweaking, and we will get to that point. That is at least my vision for the future, is my hope.
My colloquial understanding is you guys have all been working full-time for a while.
Yes, yes. And again, it's just honesty. How do you have candidates come forward and you don't have the, in my opinion, what the job entails?
Sure. Okay.
But I think when a manager comes on board, that those hours will be reduced.
Yeah.
Once they're up to speed and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
you
they'll
know,
be taking
when,
care of all the traffic cop stuff that you guys are doing now.
right, and we're not managing staff. Because I think that's one manager.
Do you know what the timing of that would be?
Pardon?
Do you know what the timing of that?
We're trying to go out now. We have the descriptions and things
A
made.
lot of
Okay.
there's, and you know, there's a vast variety of experiences that we can fit with. And learning curve is different for different people. We may get someone that's a fantastic county manager that just doesn't have experience in finance, but we really need to focus on them, and that may take a long time to get them up to speed than someone who's coming in with finance experience. I think it's hard to gauge how long that transition is gonna take, you know, we're active.
Well, I'm just thinking, if you don't have a manager, it's vacant for 6 months and you save a few bucks
You
there.
save a lot there.
Meanwhile, you're.
Yeah, and so,
Like
yeah,
I say, it hasn't, it's not like it's changed, it's just, again, a more of an honest, and I agree with Brian, eventually we will go back and it will be an honest transition.
and to your point, the county manager position is budgeted starting July 1. So if we do not have, we'll see, it's May 14th now, so in the next 6 weeks, you know, chances are that person, I guess, recruitment could go great, but it probably will take longer, so we are saving money on that position until they're hired.
HR came out with the DLO chart and they projected August with this process of recruiting and interviews. That was their projection at that time. Now, if that happens, great, but that was a projection that they had given us as commission.
Let's see, I just have a couple of quick questions. For me, overall, the budget looks great. It's very conservative. It looks like great management and, you know, and they're very conscientious of what they do. And it looks like 2 areas of basically dire situations are the sheriff's department and fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And so what is it, what can be done for the sheriff's department? Because, I mean, from looking at it, it's totally unacceptable with the number of vacancies and the issues that are around that. And as far as in the budget, it says, well, we'll be looking at some other things. And so how do we? I think just speaking for the citizenry, it's like, that's pretty important, especially given in the budget message. You promoted public safety as one of the top concerns, but that isn't reflected in the budget.
I think Scott and Bill and I all talked about that for a bit ago, and yeah, we recognize you gotta rob from Peter to pay Paul, but to his point, when you list the budget priority and then you don't address that budget priority, there's a gap there. And I think the same is true with the fairgrounds. When you list the benefit that the fairgrounds provide versus the budgeted source for it, and I understand it's a zero-sum game, and I understand where you're gonna pull from, but those are the things that we're observing that seem to be shortfalls here.
So, I don't know if you want some ideas we've been tossing around.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't wanna to take your discussion, but some of the things we talked about, so for the fairgrounds in particular, budget discussions very much centered around, well, anytime we're talking about balancing your budget, your options, if you need a change, you either have to increase revenue, decrease expense, or do a combination of the two. In looking at fairgrounds budget, we really can't shave out any more expenses. Their only option, I mean, we can nickel and dime it, but we're not gonna get a sizable savings. So really fairgrounds' only option is revenue. Right now, the state legislature and others are discussing potential options. Obviously, you know, our commissioner has been talking with the city as well, so we are exploring options. I know our fair is very proud of being like one of the few free fairs left in the state. So, you know, it's gonna be a conversation, is that more important than maintaining buildings to continue to offer it? So somehow there's gotta be a revenue conversation for fairgrounds.
Well, and there's a little bit of time, right? There.
And there is, in Jackson County, they just went ahead, there is federal funding, which we're looking into, where, you declare this an evacuation center, which let's frankly, if there's a wildfire in Jennifer Canyon, it's gonna be. And there is some federal funding coming, so I'm kind of looking into that. They just did an event center with 8 basketball courts and whatever in Jackson County. They pay $25,000 to this firm. They study your demographics and whatever, they study what you need. And then the feds come in and basically it's going out to bid and they project it at 60 million. Now, we keep printing money in DC. I'm not sure, you know, but if they're gonna keep printing it, why not have it here? So there's a discussion there. The city of Prineville, I think, is a viable, immediate discussion,
There's also.
but there is some different things. Pardon?
That House bill that got pushed
Yes,
to the.
yes.
There was a House
Yes.
bill that was introduced last year that would increase fundings on
They
state level
dramatically.
fairground, very dramatically.
They,
And it got pushed to a different legislative session.
they want to increase the percentage of funding of lottery dollars to fairgrounds also, and that's been pushed off twice that I know of. So I'm hoping that we can do that, and it's not it's a minuscule amount, but it is quite it would be a super boost for us.
You were saying the percentage is small, but the amount of money for the fairground would be.
Well, yeah, what the fairgrounds is going in, and I don't want to cite the numbers because I knew them at one time, but they even pushed it off twice, but whatever of that lottery dollars comes out and goes to fairgrounds, they want to increase it, I think, almost double fold. I want to say from 1.5 to 3, but something like that. And then that would give us increased revenue too, but it has been pushed off on the legislative slate twice.
So we've worked at AOC pretty aggressively in the short session, and they just didn't have time to kind of get their ducks in a row. The year before that, we worked on it really hard, and somebody added, funding the racing commission.
Yes, and
that killed it
yeah.
at that time. But, I think we've got a lot of really positive people on both sides of the aisle that, like we talked about, understand the value of the fairgrounds and what it did for them during COVID and these different emergencies, and really see it as, in this, I mean, there's one in Union County, it doesn't even have plumbing in the entire fairgrounds. And so, you know, and we're not the only location that has issues. It's statewide that there's issues, and we've been doing a really good job of explaining those stories to different legislators across the state. And so I think that there is a really good opportunity for that. It's no guarantee, but it's something speculative. Yeah.
One of the problems though during COVID was on the smaller fairgrounds. They became evacuation centers with the assurance they were getting money back. And as a year ago, when I went to the Oregon Affairs Association, they had still not got it. So there's a lot of disparity there. And you know, again, you're looking at these small fairgrounds, where do people go? Where are events held? It's like here in Prineville, it's very similar. So that's a little bit of a scary part for me with, and then I don't know if this is the place to bring it up on the fairgrounds, but there is a group of individuals that are going around and they want to knock down the H barn after the fair this year, and they want to put up basically a $1.2 million that mimics basically the arena that we have, the indoor arena. It would be an additional, it would have a show ring, it would house all the animals. We have a $40,000 cost right now in tents because we have more children than we have facilities. So they're in the process of trying to get that together. And if that would be successful, there's additional revenue for us, there's additional, our decrease in cost by 40,000. So there are some things that
There's some
people are, the
possibilities.
community here is extremely generous and very positive in their efforts. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed we get that.
So the bigger conversation and the most
Is the
difficult is the sheriff.
Yes.
Which we have unfortunately, we're out of time at the moment, but we
Oh,
can,
we are okay.
we are okay?
Never mind. No one's coming into the room after us.
Okay, okay,
Oh,
cool.
great, thank you.
Do we need a motion to keep going?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know,
We
I
need
never
motion
do my
to stop.
motions right. Okay.
Okay, so some of the conversations around the sheriff's office are, one idea. We have projected a 4% increase in property taxes. And for general fund and library, that is a sustainable, those budgets are both doing well. Sheriff's office is the one struggling. So in fiscal 24, we had predicted, I believe it was a 5% property tax increase. When tax roll came around, it actually ended up being a 9.4% increase, so dramatically higher. So currently, the way it's set up, we are just proportionally continuing to allocate out those dollars as plans, including those increases. So all the funds benefit when taxes come in higher than we assume. So one of the ideas would be whatever is above and beyond that assumption that comes in, we funnel that to the sheriff's office to get them in better standing. So if we end up having a 5% instead of a 4.5%, that additional 0.5% of revenue of property taxes, we could funnel to fund 251 instead of,
Which is the sheriff's office.
sorry, sheriff's office fund. Instead of proportionally, instead of maintaining that, well, this fund gets X% and this fund gets X% and this fund gets X%.
So to mirror that back to you, what you're saying is that this budget as it stands now spreads those funds that you described equally among those different venues receiving property funds.
It's not completely equal, but it is published. So,
Okay, if I-
right, so sheriff's office, yes,
So
yes.
if we were to entertain an additional funding source for this budget, Bill might consider proposing a differentiation in the distribution of any overage above that building. Would that be?
There are some other options we're considering that have been discussed. One of those is the opportunity to do a special levy for the sheriff's office, a special local option levy for the sheriff's office. And we figured out what was the amount, 3,000.
It depends on their service level,
Which would
but
require a vote.
it would require a vote.
And we
But it'd
know how
be
that
50
goes to the
cents,
school district.
75 cents.
Well, yeah,
Per thousand.
and the sheriff's office is not.
They're also not the best at running, campaigns.
Well, we I wasn't gonna get into that, but I'm just suggesting that special levies haven't always had universal
Correct,
success.
Right, and that's
So.
one of the discussions.
From
This
a
mechanism-
community member's perspective on that very topic, the fact that we don't have transparency as to the dollars that will be coming into the community from the data centers, right? And it's not even a year, right? And that's another concern that I have. It's not published, but it's this big number, right? But what's that mean? And so why would the community members vote to pay more in property taxes when there's this mystery windfall coming?
Very
And
well
that,
said.
does that make sense?
Very well said, yes.
And so everyone's like, well, we're just gonna sit and wait for the data center to start paying the property taxes, and then all these problems just go away. Well, do they? I don't know. I read through this budget end to end, and it
You didn't
says.
see any reference to 27 or 28?
I did. And it says, we're not gonna speculate what it is, because we don't know what it is. So it's not in here in the forecast.
There were a couple of references to some general accommodation, right?
But there's no dollar amount associated with it.
But dealing with the 2025 benefit potentially to the sheriffs, you said there were other options available, but beyond the levy and beyond the first point?
Yeah, the challenge we have is it's like you mentioned, it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. The other options we have are a lump sum transfer from the general fund, and that's a short-term Band-Aid to help cover the deficit in that fund. But the general fund can't continue to sustain that, because at the end of the day, it's the dollars, so we just have to shut it.
I didn't want to make it sound like I wasn't for a levy. I wasn't,
Well,
that wasn't my intent.
you've been tired, you have the same concerns that everybody is.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to other people. in the community, that voters.
The idea of the levy, so they're typically a defined number of years. And so if one was to be presented to voters, it would be for that gap until we have a better sense of what happens when we do receive, hopefully Apple and Facebook, whatever that looks like. So it would just be this gap from here to there. So it would be well, I don't know if that would be considered the 3 years or 4 years, or maybe you make it 5, so that maybe there would be overlap to get things in a really good spot. But it would be something the voters would have to reconsider after that time period, if it was to continue or not continue, or the sheriff's office would not put it forward anymore if we know what we're gonna do. So.
Just out of
That's just
curiosity, if we were to assume a 4.5% increase in property tax revenue, and what does 1% difference in property tax revenue mean in monetary dollar amounts?
Like 190,000?
I was gonna say it's about 200, so well done, yeah. Yeah, every 1% benefit, yeah.
But I'm right in that we have funding for the next 2 years, but then the sheriff, basically, we're pretty well out of money on our 3rd year.
And there's a few things that are in that are looking at it all in one thing, instead of separating out full probation and patrol and jail, are a little bit of a challenge to look at, because community corrections, which is full probation, had a significant decrease in their funding. So they're spending down $700,000 of their restricted fund balance.
So of the spend down that we have in the current year, I guess it's not all property tax spend down. Again,
that revenue is anticipated to increase back to prior biennium levels, but that is also reliant on legislation and changes to measure. The drug laws, 110, that's what it is, the drug laws and those changes, so we're anticipating that to increase back to where it was. But even when we look at that revenue, it's still not gonna cover the adjustments in the next few years. And whether the state's gonna adjust revenue to take account for that and increase their budget and the grant funds they receive to account for the increase in that, that's another unknown. Which is hard to include in forecast, because we can't include that the state is gonna do that. Not saying that it's the sheriff's office is we need to figure out what we're gonna do for sustainable funding for it. And when, especially
versus pure.
well, and then we have the union, that we don't have any idea what increases they're gonna ask, other than they're going to be fairly chunky ones.
Well, it sounded like their labor was much lower also than our competitive markets.
Exactly, that's.
And they did a compensation study, last
Certain
year,
positions.
so there's certain positions that are out of whack. But that, you kind of have real life, then you have what the union wants to, work with or request, and that doesn't necessarily always match. And because we don't have any idea, they're just requesting to open that early. Those negotiations technically wouldn't start until 2025, June 2025, I believe is when it ends. So we start early 2025. That's another one of the unknowns that it could potentially make it look worse.
Yeah.
Than what it
That's
was.
not necessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah, some of our conversations with the sheriff's office have been to understand really what service levels are provided at different things, because they have had so much vacancy. you know, I think it would be helpful to get more information about, you know, if they're only spending about 90% of their budget, what is a 90% service level? Like what, when we, you know, when we hope that we can fill these positions, what does that service level difference look like? You know, so that the community understands, we are prioritizing public safety, but these are the different service levels and the different benchmarks we're aiming for. This is what we currently do. This is where we're currently budgeted at and our goal. So I think we could definitely use some more information about how we're narrating service level. That conversation kind of came too late to include in the budget document, but that is a goal to flesh that out better.
So, thought, there is money in that fund for this calendar year, for this budget cycle. There is contingency money available in the event that the labor cost grows beyond what's forecasted. But we see a significant deficit occurring in following years.
Yeah, and potentially sooner.
It has to be addressed.
And potentially sooner, exactly.
I think it's critical that in this next 12-month period, the solution be derived on how to create long-term sustainability in our sheriff's department. Because the money's there. We need to be able to spend it, we need to be able to hire, right? But it's also retention, obviously, and training. But we are all seeing a roadmap that's not sustainable for a community that aligns with our goals.
I think, and just to add some perspective, and I agree that these are things that need to be solved. I mean, if you talk to any municipality on the West Coast, they're all having trouble employing, at full employment. I mean, I know in the city of Portland, they've been hundreds and hundreds of officers below budget and payroll, but I can understand why we want to be confident.
I was gonna say.
But my point is that what we're facing here is a local problem and a universal problem.
Yes.
And obviously, it can be addressed by paying these guys more to a degree. You're gonna recruit better longer term, employment by paying them what everybody else is paying them, absolutely. But recognize we're not in a vacuum here, everybody's having the same problem.
Right.
So.
But hopefully we can attract the officer from Portland that just wants out of that market, right? And wants to get back to being a police officer.
Well, it's my understanding that has been occurring.
That's definitely.
But point in fact, I did Citizens Academy, you do a lot. The deputy that I was with, who has been here a while, said, no one knows this yet, but I put my application into Deschutes. He goes, and it's not because I don't love it here, and I don't love this county, and I don't love the people. I need more money. That's a point in fact. That's just me in a police car with it. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. So yes, we have a problem. And I agree, public safety is a big thing. And lawlessness is increasing.
Yeah.
So we have but I would definitely not want to be a cop in Portland. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That was a bad.
Yeah, it costs a lot more, I think. Filling those positions and losing them and refilling them ends up costing a lot more than just
Exactly.
filling them at a more equitable pay level to
Absolutely.
start.
Well, it increases risk, especially in roles such as those, right? Because they are dealing with the public. And, we've all seen in this last year challenges with the sheriff's department, not to bring it up, but it happens. And, the more training you have, the more experience you have, the less likely you are to get yourself into those situations. So, I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it. It's not just one thing.
No, and the mental health problem basically is growing. And, that's an issue. I mean, they're not just dealing with, I stole something. They're trying to deal with people who have severe mental health problems and are self-medicating. You know, it's a big, big thing.
So, if we pass this as it is, with with an amendment or an additional thing, say we didn't do that, the commission has the ability, right, during the year to direct the funds or as those unknown, there's no such thing as extra money, right?
It'd be nice.
Comes in, so the question then, well, and everything that we do is a recommendation effectively anyway, right?
Well, and you can put, you know, a couple of years ago, we had a budget committee that had a punch list of some items that they wanted to see happen in the next year. And you can request those items, that we need to have a sustainable funding plan for the sheriff's office. They requested quarterly reports,
There were a few things, but yeah, those were things that we worked on and then it became a point of presentation during the next budget.
Was among those recommendations, was there, we need a fundable spend and sheriff's state, okay, that was not in that one a couple.
That was not in that.
Okay, just check.
No, that was,
Just check.
that was
We
been
did
on our
not
radar.
check that box.
Yeah, that was been on our radar, but it's not a simple fix. And
Sure,
so
absolutely.
it continues.
But
to-
it is, that is getting able to be kicked shorter and shorter distances
Right.
down the road. We're kind of-
But
And I'm not
a
sure-
a statement such as anything above the budgeted 4.5% increase in property taxes, this committee would direct go to the sheriff's office. Could be a proposal potentially of this committee, would that be correct?
I believe so.
Just check.
Then when we want to put something that scrutiny on continued operation or something to that we, just because we get extra money, we still need to look at how the sheriff's department is functioning and be able to figure out where we're getting this from. Yeah, and I think that it has to be
Part two is-
twofold,
yeah.
yeah, people.
Part 1, 2, and 3 today, ongoing, and the pipe dream, Facebook in the sky.
Item dream being what sustainable, stable funding for the sheriff's department that's not subject to periodic levies and other things. I think it's pretty important. Yeah.
So one thing that exasperated the issue a little bit, so. In the fiscal 24 budget, we did go ahead and implement part of their strategic plan, which added 3 patrol deputies. And they mentioned it lightly, but not in detail, so just for context, it converted all their jail techs that were lower paid unlicensed positions into licensed positions, because there was such a struggle to keep shifts filled. You had somebody show up, and if they're not licensed, they can't work with inmates, they can only run the control tower, so now everybody in the jail can run the control tower or can work with inmates.
Hopefully not everybody that's in jail. That can do that.
Sorry. Our employees,
Just saying.
our employees, thank you for the clarification for the record. But that costs more. So we did do some strategic things in the fiscal 24 budget, but then it makes us even less sustainable in the future. So, the hope, their strategic plan still has us adding 3 more positions, which, again, our undersheriff touched on. We're not putting those in this year. In the forecast, they would be ones that kind of bridge between 26 and 27, which just causes the forecast.
But it
No.
appears that even with those strategic positions that are currently added, that they haven't hired the FTEs because A, they're not competitive, or B, I mean, you've still got,
There's still a retention problem, right? So I'm just saying the budget looks kind of worse, the forecast looks worse because we are trying to prioritize their strategic plans to fill shifts a certain way to increase our service level, but our revenue does not match that desire and our actual practice of being able to hire those positions so far. They've hired a ton this year, but we've also had people leave for a variety of reasons, not only because of money. There's been a variety of reasons.
they're all working over in the Deschutes County.
Not all.
I just said,
But,
in
so,
my 4 hours
Yeah.
with the guy, he was pretty good.
so there is this constant.
And Will's going to Deschutes County because they're gonna pay him more over there.
Well, it's not a lot.
Will is an exception because he's not allowed to leave because we just let him off the chain and shackle just for the year. He's gotta get back in there, so he can't wait.
So yeah, so just to give you some context, so that's kind of what we've been doing, so.
Right.
Please.
Do you have, and I just want to, like, with a disclaimer, I'm not suggesting this, but what would it take to adjust the property tax rate to fix this problem?
We are not allowed to change our permanent rate. The three,
That's a by vote.
it's not a vote, it's like a state mandated, permanent rates.
Yeah,
Yeah, permanent rates get established, there's nothing we, like,
that's a lot of the past in the eighties.
yeah, Crook County gets
I think it
the,
was.
yeah,
Yeah.
3.8702, that is it.
So your house can appreciate, your house can double 3 years in a row and the property tax. can
And that
go up
won't change,
3.8%.
okay, well.
Yeah, so the only way, yeah, the local option levy would be the only way to temporarily increase property taxes.
Or they can keep building new houses in Versado.
Well, that would help. I mean, that in some ways is how you get from the estimated
Sure,
at
that's-
4 or 5% increase, but it ended up being 9 because there was new construction and pieces that were not part of our conservative estimation.
High value.
Yeah,
Thank you for my education.
I wish.
And I can sleep better.
Right, no. Yeah, your permanent rate can't change.
Okay, good.
Rest assured.
So what's the pleasure of the committee to include a recommendation from here?
Do we need to do that now or can we do that Friday? Well, are we supposed
So they're
to,
letting
whether
us,
it's today or tomorrow, which is gonna happen, are we gonna summarize this right now?
If we can come to a conclusion now, then, I'm ready to be here on Thursday. That's what we plan to do, but, is there something that will change between now and Thursday?
Do we need to do that? So we can move this 3-4 middle of June.
Just come up with a plan if you're comfortable.
I would propose that any increase in revenue above and beyond the 4.5 projected for this fiscal year going forward, go to the sheriff's office.
Be reallocated to the sheriff's office.
That's a motion.
If you wish to take it as such, yes, that's a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion made in second, so what other discussion do we have?
The development of a sustainable plan for the sheriff's department going forward that includes
That's a different motion.
prior motion.
So you would amend that motion to
Correct.
add that? Did you get that addition?
The motion's amended to
Create a sustainable financial plan for the sheriff's department for future years,
in fiscal year 25,
25, 26, 27.
well, a fiscal plan for 26-7.
Yes.
Be created within fiscal year 25.
Do you accept that amendment? As the verse?
As I restated it.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Restating your own. So,
Any other topics about the third board or anything?
Can I rent an armored truck and go over there?
Yeah, sure.
I know.
You know,
I can help.
I think that we should just put $1 levy on every Subway sandwich portion.
There we go, there we go.
And he'll quickly find another funding source.
There you go. I like that, maybe $2, what the heck?
I can, he'll find a quicker funding source.
10 cents an inch.
okay, any more discussion on?
Did the six of us vote on that?
What's that?
I don't know how that's going to be to implement,
I was just gonna ask that.
because we're suggesting something, and by no means am I not in favor of the sheriff's office increasing, doing well and everything, but that all comes with a price. And, you know, there are 1,500 departments that are in this county, and are we going to do that and take money away from them? Or how?
The budget as it exists now is that all those departments that are in the budget that would share in that 4.5% increase, as it is budgeted in the current iteration there, would still receive that 4.5% funding that they're fully budgeted for, that increase of 4.5%, as it's in that budget. What I was attempting to propose is that none of them would have anything cut from that 4.5%, but only any potential overage above and beyond what's budgeted in that 4.5% increase would be directed specifically to the sheriff's department. So are you suggesting that that would shortchange those other departments?
I don't know.
Right.
It wouldn't increase their revenue, wouldn't increase.
But to what extent were there some anticipations of additional dollars?
So,
You know,
so in the
just-
forecast, yeah, currently the forecasts have a conservative growth to property tax. And all of those that benefit from property tax just receive that assumed assumption. So just because we assume, oh, fiscal 26 will have this % increase, we're not gonna just keep that number locked in. At this point in time, that's our assumption. A year from now, when we're doing next year's budget, we will probably have a different assumption, because we will have trended it out and seen what do we think is the right % for next year. And so we would then, you know.
And this motion only affects 25 budget
Okay,
as it relates to the specific overage of 4.5%, which is already built into all the other 14 departments. The second part of the motion is more of a long-range strategic planning for concepts that we are recommending occurs specifically in fiscal year 25, as it relates to, resolving sheriff's shortfalls going further out. So we're not taking anything away from anybody here for 25. Everybody, all the other departments would still receive their full funding as proposed. What we're suggesting is that if there is an overage, I think the 3 committee members were suggesting in that motion that go to the sheriff's department. Specifically, is that count?
For the calendar year.
For calendar year 25.
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year 25, I'm
we don't have
sorry.
to-
And that strategic plan, we are recommending be developed in fiscal year 25 to address the shortfalls in the future years that the sheriff's department faces. Did I say that?
It's a short-term gap.
And it's only there if there is that over 4%, which isn't back, it's just hope.
Is the juice worth the squeeze, you know, thinking it through, with the 1% being 180,000? Is 180,000 worth making the change?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
If there's a 1% increase in tax revenue in the next.
Is it really gonna help?
Yeah.
Or is it like just a little Band-Aid?
Right.
Well,
And
even
then
if-
it's about it. I mean,
Yeah, I
it
think
is still under, yes.
Problem today, but I think this is enough way to help.
I mean, it's at least one position.
It's at least one position, and not only that, it states that the budget committee in public record recognizes that they consider this to be the big issue of this budget, and going forward, hope and expectation that future budget committees and commissioners will be keeping that at the top of their own.
It's kind of like a one-year grant and has the potential of exasperating the problem. Right, if you say, okay, here's another 190,000 or $380,000 and go ahead and spend it, but then the next year it isn't there. You just made it worse.
But we also, in the second part, the amended motion said, hey, figure out a way to deal with it.
Right.
This is a problem. You guys gotta keep your eye focus and your lens on it. So it's not going away. You gotta fix it.
At what point do we anticipate having a better number on the tax impacts of the data centers in 28?
That's a really great.
Well, if they keep building new things, they keep getting in, don't they get a deferral? Every time they add to the footprint, they get something attached to the deferral
Of that building.
of that building, and so. So if they add to their footprint within the existing building, there is a loophole where they potentially could postpone
Well, for that part.
for that part.
But not of the other building.
Not
buildings.
Well, yeah, but they go back and they add, well, I guarantee you that they will try and find a way to delay taxes, but they are facing what you guys can probably come up with over the course of the next year with some less nebulous numbers in your future forecast.
A lot of it depends on their accounting treatment, right, and how they do purchasing and how quickly they
So
change
that's
things
the
out.
other kind of unknown. If there's some discussion about the way personal property would be treated in those data centers and a potential opportunity for a reduction in the amount of personal property taxes they would pay on the equipment that's in those data centers. And that's quite a big unknown.
I think by this summer, we will have it narrowed down a little closer. And Christina's right, our biggest thing, I think going forward with the property taxes, that's gonna be easy. It's the personal property tax, it's gonna be difficult. Because a lot of these enterprise zones were made for a different era of time, when equipment went into a building that had a long time period on it. Well, you know, the equipment they use in there now is a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. And there are some clauses in their contracts on 3 and 4 years, in addition to the 15-year. And so those are the things that we're working through and working with the city and a big drive to kind of get to the bottom of all of it. And I think by this summer that we will have a better understanding of what.
So next year, when
Yeah.
the components of this committee come back together, there will be some much more firm numbers in the future budget. They will answer that.
That's the expectation.
Well, I think it'd be worth having, maybe setting a meeting for after we have that information. Share what we found.
If you're interested in a midpoint, like a checkpoint.
Yeah, that's, I've seen that, happen before, do a mid-year update, to the committee, and so you see where how everyone's doing, and now, and with more information, it's coming. That would be, I think, and having now having the staggered, terms and all of that, the stability for the committee, and with so many big changes coming, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Not that I need another meeting.
We know you love to be with us.
Yes, I'm learning.
We do already do mid-year updates for departments, and that can be something that is announced to those mid-year department meetings that kind of kick off our budget season, particularly around January, February. So it'd be a little bit later than maybe when we have the information in the Justice Center, or, sorry, the data centers. But that could be an opportunity as well.
And maybe that's when we talk about the sheriff's department again. Do it a two-part, we have more information.
Because to Brian's point, I mean, I know you're saying we're not making it a priority, but I think we're at like 70% now of the county budget we're putting towards the sheriff's department.
It's 57.7% of property taxes as well as other general fund revenues like alcohol tax, and there's a few other.
But I'm saying if you put in the DA's office and the law.
Oh, I see.
DA's office.
Is a huge portion.
And the juvenile department.
Yes.
That dramatically increases that percentage to.
But isn't that analogous to most counties?
Yeah. But I'm just saying, we're definitely putting a lot of resources towards it, and it's like, yeah, to your point, everywhere. In the
Well,
country. I don't think
what's
anywhere.
more important than public safety and community health, really,
Yeah, yeah.
as far as what the county is providing. But
So while we have a long ways to go with public safety, we have come a long ways.
Yeah.
And, it'd be kind of nice to see how that flows out before we get real. Add something else, see what, the steps that we have in progress, how they work and flow out.
well, that information would be helpful to know, because all we have to go by is, here's the county has made it a priority and the budget doesn't really meet it.
Like that.
But yeah, but I'm first one to say I'm not fully aware of, what's been going on and things in process. But having said all of that, are we ready to vote on this motion?
Which motion?
Yeah, let's restate it.
Yeah. Well, it's between the two of you restating your negotiated motion.
Go ahead, Steve. From the beginning.
The motion, well, I've got every iteration thereof, or just
I like
the
that.
summation.
Just the final, like, just the final.
Given that the current budget anticipates a 4.5% property tax increase spread across the departments listed in the budget, we're proposing that any overage above and beyond that 4.5% be allocated specifically to the sheriff's department. And we would further state that we would anticipate the finance department over the course of, with assistance of the county over the course of fiscal year 2025 to develop a methodology, a recommended methodology of funding the future shortfalls in the current sheriff's department budget. What I was saying?
Do you want to add something about the mid-year meeting?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you want to add the mid-year meeting?
Want to add about the mid-year meeting?
We're making this, is that a separate thing? I mean,
As a separate.
that's kind of a separate thing. I mean, it's, I agree, that's definitely a great idea, and, active feedback is a good thing. Meeting once more.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's, so, all in favor of the restated motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And so you have that motion. Okay, good. Do we need a motion to, basically, we're asking for an invitation to a budget update?
You have whatever invitation. you
Yeah, I don't know if you need a motion for that, other than just us making it a priority, or you just say we make it a priority to get there.
So we would calendar in January or something like that. Is that your-
Yeah, around it.
It'll be January, February.
Yeah, mid to end January, the beginning of February.
Do you think it would be more formal just to say that as a priority, we would like to have a budget committee come together for a mid-year meeting? I just think.
Yeah.
It makes it a little,
Maybe another deliverable we could take
I
care
just
of.
think it makes it a little cleaner.
Sure, that's great.
I make a motion to, have a meeting mid-year next year, mid-year budget meeting next year.
That being January. So for clarity, people outside of January, February. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, another conversation around that discussion? Question? Okay, all in favor?
I
Opposed? Okay, great, thank you, we are invited.
It won't be an ingredient invitation. I just want you to lower your expectations.
Okay, good, so, so then having that in place, is there, are we thinking, I'm violating my own rule of discussion on the motion, but, that do we do go ahead with the 140,502,000?
I have one more topic,
Okay,
related to the sheriff's department. I see significant risks in the district attorney's office. And I was just trying to pull it back up because I apologize.
100% turnover and.
The turnover rate is obviously terrible. And I think we've got significant risk having our district attorney working nights and weekends and having a single point of failure in our county to support our sheriff's department. Arrests don't mean anything if you can't get it to court, get it to trial. And I don't believe that there was any contingency money in that budget in case something were to happen to your primary district attorney.
So because the district attorney is part of the general fund, then they are part of general fund's contingency.
Okay,
So if something happens mid-year, we could put a budget resolution forward for the commissioners, or the commissioners could request the finance office, get a budget resolution put together. We could use money from general fund contingency.
okay,
It's a large enough fund that I think any amount that we would need would fit within a simple budget resolution. We wouldn't need a major supplemental budget for it. If that makes sense.
Also, technically, it's a state office, and this is something I've been working through ARC for a long time as well, that I believe that the entire DA's office should be paid for at the state level since they're doing the state's work.
okay.
And all we've been doing every year is just giving them more and more money because we want that, have those people locally to provide that service to put people in jail. But I think it would solve a lot of problems too. You wouldn't have as many people shopping around if it was one pay statewide. I'm not saying we can get that fixed this year, but I think we need to continue to fight for that. And I think the fact that we got PERS in there, I think that's gonna help a lot.
With attraction, retention.
Yeah,
But this isn't a Crook County problem.
exactly.
It was on TV, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks ago, Deschutes is having a problem. It's a statewide problem. We're just not getting lawyers that want to do this sort of work. So I agree with you. It's because if you arrest them and you can't prosecute them, what's the point, basically?
Yeah.
But again, it's not a solvable problem by us in this room today. It's a statewide, may even be a whole Western. I'm not aware of what the other states are, so it's a problem.
The only thing I was gonna add to that also is that if for some reason that office was empty, they do have the Department of Justice that backs that up. And I don't think they charge us for that do you remember that, Brian, when we? Between
I know,
DAs?
because the DA is paid for by the state, she's a state.
75%.
Yeah,
75%. And if she has to be vacant, then it's up to the state to put someone in that position.
okay. So I think there are
That's a
some
risk.
there's some fail safes.
Yeah.
You probably just not aware of, yeah.
Absolutely unaware of.
Yeah.
But
I just thought
it is a
Yeah, I
problem.
appreciate that.
No, it is a bad
And it's
situation.
very frightening to
Yeah,
Acknowledge it, it's,
force people to be
yeah,
lawyers.
and this has been a problem for a very long time.
Yeah.
This is kind of the training grounds, and, then they move on. And they do their things, right?
I mean, I think we have an issue with caseload too, because we have a COVID backlog. I think that slowed things down a lot, so.
Courthouse too, only having one.
Right, so,
courthouse for so long.
yeah, there's been some bottlenecks that have caused, I think, some of the burnout issues of our deputy district attorneys. And you're right, it's not isolated to Crook County, but it has been a factor, I would assume. I think it's been a factor in the last couple years of turnover.
And
It's
the
just
working
caseloads.
conditions have been, real poor and all of that, and in the small space and. Everybody's has an office and.
You can advertise for new DAs when you open up a new courthouse, you just have a shiny TV ad.
Yeah, I know.
Show all their new jigs, they
Come to Crook County.
Yeah, come to Crook County.
Nicest justice centers ever. So
okay,
hopefully we're making progress.
sounds like a bigger issue.
Yeah, it really was. Because at the shoots in this television thing, it was that they were gonna start letting out more criminals because they didn't have prosecutors, which is frightening. And if you go, like I say, in Citizens County, when you see the way that they do the sentencing, that part is frightening too. The guys they have, I think they should be in there a lot longer than they are, but yeah, it's kind of frightening, the whole thing.
And so although we've had vacancies in the current year, we also have had a contracted deputy district attorney. He doesn't prosecute live for trials, but does a lot of, from what I understand, you know better than I do, does a lot of the prep behind the scenes. So some of that time consuming stuff, we've been able to outsource a little bit,
Okay.
with this, budget fluctuations. And I know that our DA has been really happy, with his performance because she wanted us to make sure we had money in the budget for him on the off chance that, some of her vacancies continue, or if she can't fill those positions right away, she wanted to make sure that she would have resources to keep him, because he's been very helpful.
Well, that addresses a lot of my concerns, just having that super contract and the availability of the contract. I think it's just because you have the dollars doesn't mean you can give it people. who fill
Right,
out.
so we do have a person and we have enough resource, especially if there is an unfilled position, there's enough resource to keep him. Plus, she requested that we keep a little bit there so that there would be overlap. So she could even hire somebody and keep this contracted person doing what he's doing so that it's not, she's got what he needs to do.
Putting the backlog to work on.
Yeah, yes, so.
Unfortunately,
So we have tried to address that. It's obviously not solving the issue entirely, but what we do, right?
thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Great questions.
Okay, other issues before we, or a big motion? Okay, well then, I'll be looking for a second. I'll move that the Budget Committee of Crook County, Oregon approve the budget for the 2024-2025 fiscal year as amended in the amount of $140,502,000.
So that includes the change we proposed.
That's right.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Noted, it includes that $1 million adjustment. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed? Great. Thank
So
you.
we have off on Thursday?
And
You
you're
have, you have one more motion. You can't go anywhere until you.
I thought, well, maybe we're just all going.
Oh, there we go.
We're having a party Thursday or something.
That's important too.
That's what it is, yeah, even though I'm told that it doesn't matter, it doesn't change, right? So I would move that the Budget Committee of Crook County, Oregon approve property taxes for the 2024-2025 fiscal year in the amount of $3.8702 per 1,000 assessed value for the permanent tax rate levy, and in the amount of $619,000 for the general obligation levy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion?
I assume that's no change because there's no additional levies this year, right? Okay.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're done, and we have Thursday off.
Right. And on Thursday off, thank you all so much for being part of this process. I appreciate you all spending a little more time today. And we really appreciate all your questions and being here. Thank you again, so.
See you in January.
How about thank you guys?
Yeah.
You're the ones who did all the work. We just sat here with smiles on our faces. And good questions. Thank you,
Well,
ladies.
Friday at 2 to 3 is for the Crook County Historical
Don't forget to
Society.
in the meeting.
They're not part of that. They're not part of it, so it's just that.
Now we're in January.
I think we should. Are
you done? We can re-up it again.
No, they're.
Yeah.
Well, that's you guys will get, like, have their own budget committee. They're the commissioners. No, that's not your.
Yeah, there's scratching. Just hit it.
Here,